And we are live. How he is getting on? Good to see you. Hang on, I gotta set up my line. Before we went live, like a second before we went live, I was like, hang on, I need to check everything and make sure it's all okay. And I thought I did that. Then I realized I didn't have my line turned on properly. So yep. And we're a few minutes late as well. We're like 8 minutes late as well, so I've got no excuse for this one. But we were chatting. We were talking about the education system in
Yeah.
our comrades' upbringing. But yeah, Harry's getting on to everybody in the chat. How are things getting on? I see Jake English, Socialist Swan, Artem Platov, C Lato, TK, Ultra Mahan. Harry's getting on. I hope you are all well. We've got a fantastic guest here today, an OG left wing YouTuber. We have comrade azureScapegoat with us here today. Comrade, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience? Maybe give people a brief overview about your YouTube channel on the off chance that they haven't heard of it before. I don't know how they haven't, but they might not have.
Yeah. I'm a sheer scapegoat. I started my channel in February of 2017. I made a video called The Difference Between Socialism, Communism, and Marxism Explained by a Marxist, which in hindsight is a terrible title, but that's what it is called.
I got the clicks. That's like a million
Yeah.
views or something, doesn't it?
It has 2.1 million views.
No biggie, just 2.1 million views.
I also made a video called How Democracy Works in Cuba, which has 141,000 views, which was 2 years ago now,
Well
which I'm
deserved.
very proud of. It was a very good video, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was very good. I do recall
Yeah.
that. Well, but I'd say we were talking about this before the stream. The highlight that really sticks out to me was that Trotskyism video. Trotskyism explained, and it was a little meme from Futurama of Bender getting kicked out and saying he's going to start his own decentralized economy.
Yeah.
So
For some reason, that video got ripped and it was uploaded to Bilibili, the Chinese YouTube equivalent, and it has like 30,000 views on there and a bunch of comments all in Mandarin. I don't know what people are like saying about it, but
I think
it
that was
seems to be popular.
I think that was Xi Jinping. Just doing spare time at the weekend. Big fan of Azure Scapegoat.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Do you want to tell people a little bit about your political development over years? Over the years, I'm not sure if you want to do that like independently of the channel or like talk about that sort of with the channel and maybe if it has developed like with the channel. I think it'd be an interesting one to discuss a little bit. I know you're kind of a little bit more. You're just kind of Marxist. So you kind of just say Marxist and you don't want
Yeah.
to be boxed in or anything like that. But be interested to know how you sort of came to Marxism and how you got here, and if it was really the Scandinavian education system that the cultural Marxism that got you.
I think the Scandinavian education system, above all else, teaches you how good everything is uh, in Sweden. Like I
Mm.
know in like social studies class and stuff, and in history class, we would talk about like how Russia is a dictatorship, and Russia was a dictatorship during the Soviet Union, and in the United States, they had the Civil War and they had slavery and they had like civil rights and segregation and all these things.
Mm.
The entire world is really terrible, but in Sweden we have things really good and everything is great. That's kind of like what I took away from my education in in Sweden growing up. It's just Sweden is the best of both
You can
worlds.
chill.
We were neutral during the Cold War, which is like barely even true.
Mm.
And like we're the best of both worlds. We do everything correctly. We care about people and all these things. And then you kind of step outside the school and you look around and you see like homeless people on the street and you're like, are we the best country in the world?
Truth moments.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
And how did
I
you come into contact with the Marxisms? Did was it an evil professor who was manipulating things behind the scenes, or
I wish I had like a Marxist professor or something. No, it's kind of funny actually. It was very much random and on a whim, but I was just walking home from school from the tram, and I saw graffiti on like one of those power boxes things on the street,
yeah?
and it said RKU.NU. So I looked it up. I mean, because I'd walked past it before and I didn't know what it was. So
Mm.
I looked it up, and it was the website for Revolutionary Communist Youth. Um, and I
Amazing.
just read a little bit about them, and they were talking about like capitalism is really bad, and like socialism and revolution and all these things. And I was like, huh, okay. So I clicked the join button, and they sent me a mail. They sent me like a letter in the mail with like stickers and like little leaflets and like information and stuff. Like,
Mm.
hey, you see, you're interested in joining. Like, here's all this information about Marxism and everything. And I went to like a membership meeting thing, and there was really good camaraderie. The people there were really nice, like a
Mm.
bunch of young people like me about my age. Um, and that was a youth organization of the Communist Party.
Mm.
Um, and we had like study groups and things about Marxism and Leninism, and I read a lot of Lenin during that time
Mm.
when I was in that organization.
Extremely based.
And that's around the time when I started my YouTube channel as well,
Mm.
because
That's when it all pops off.
I was learning these things, and I was learning like oh, communism isn't just when the government does stuff, and like Marxism, like I didn't even know what Marxism was or who Karl Marx was or anything like that.
Mm.
Um, and like I learned like there are people who don't think that Stalin like was an evil dictator who just killed everyone and all these things.
Mm.
And so um yeah, the first video that I made, the difference between socialism and communism video, I made that because I was arguing with just random people on Reddit, which
Mm.
is not something I do anymore, but it was something I did back then.
Better for the mental health.
Yeah. And the same question came up a lot of the time. It's just people were getting confused about what does socialism even mean, or like what does communism even mean, and
Mm.
that kind of stuff. And so I just sat down and I made that video so that I could link it to people I was arguing with on Reddit. So that instead of like copying pasting and all these arguments, I could just like take this video that I made
Mm.
and paste it and be like, here, I explained it. Just watch this. Um, and it might as well have been like an unlisted video. Like it was never made to be seen by anyone other than like people I was sending it to. But
Mm.
then for some reason it started getting views, and now it has 2 million of them. So
Worked out
and
pretty well.
yeah. And then after that video like got a bunch of views, I was like, well, I should probably make another video. So I did.
Try and get 3 million views.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the one that I made after that was the Trotskyism explained meme video, which is your favorite.
I love that so much. Oh, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It perfectly encapsulates it. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's absolutely fascinating to hear. It's really interesting to hear about people getting uh, active and mobilized and learning about these things through graffiti of all things. Like you hear a lot of people
Yeah.
like getting radicalized online, or their friends are talking about it, or there's a lot of that kind of stuff going around. But graffiti, that's an interesting one. It's
Yeah, it
sort of
was just a website spray painted on a power box, and I was like, huh. I wonder what that is, because it was right by me. I probably walked by it like 100 times,
mm.
and
Had you
I was
any
I was
kind
just
of
curious.
Did you have any kind of political inkling before you started looking into that? I mean, did you kind of have any conception of like what capitalism was, liberalism, social democracy, these kinds of things, or was this your first real political sort of
No, I
education to
mean,
sort of lead into the rest of
the
this?
first time I was like getting into any kind of politics was when I was like 12, 11, 12, about that age,
Oh,
and I was
really?
on Tumblr. Um, and like, because I grew up on the countryside, and in a very conservative and in hindsight extremely racist town.
Right.
um, I grew up with a lot of stereotypes about black people and gay people and trans people and all these things. And
Mm.
I ended up on Tumblr, I think, because I was watching Doctor Who at the time, and I somehow found my way onto there.
Nice.
Yeah, and
That's cool.
I interacted with gay people like for the first time. I learned what like homosexuality was, and like
Mm.
I learned what it means to be trans. I learned that I just learned not to be a bigoted fucking asshole, and that people are different, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So, I mean, essentially, the first interaction I had with politics was just like, social justice, right?
Mm.
Like the anti-racism and anti-homophobia and that kind of stuff. And like, I think what like the whole gay marriage thing in the U.S. was going on. I
Mm.
think, and like that was gonna be passed, and there was like that one lady who was like refused to sell a wedding cake to a gay couple.
Oh
Like
yeah,
that's the kind of
yeah.
stuff that I was engaged in. Like that's the kind of politics that I was first into.
I'm so
Um,
I'm so jealous that you figured this out when you were like 12, 13, 14, such a young age. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm still figuring this shit out. you know? I mean, I was always kind of like progressive on like the social stuff, but in terms of like actually understanding like socialism and really understanding capitalism and all this kind of stuff, I hadn't a clue
yeah.
until like probably like my early to mid 20s. And even then, even now,
Mm.
I'm still like, if someone like stopped me on the street and was like, "Paul, define communism right now," I'd be just like, eh, uh, shit. It's like stateless, classless, moneyless society, So
Yeah.
yeah, it's still well, I suppose it's all a process of learning and education, and that's what we're doing here. And these days, can I ask these days what you're up to? And that can either be just like profession wise, whether you're studying, whether you're doing like political work, or
Yeah.
whether it's mostly just kind of YouTube stuff, or as much as you want to say, of course.
Well, I'm studying still
Cool.
university. I'm doing a high school teacher program,
Oh, nice.
uh, mainly social studies and history, but I'm dabbling in a bunch of different things. Right now, I'm doing like a kind of like a liberal arts kind of thing, where it's like we do like classic literature, like like the Greeks, like the Odyssey and the Iliad and the Aeneid and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
I'm learning a bit of Latin. I'm learning a bit of Greek. I'm learning a bit of Arabic.
Ow.
And I'm gonna like read the Plato texts that the Arabic merchants like as close to the original writings or whatever as you can get is in Arabic
Ow.
and that kind of stuff.
That sounds kind of torturous. To be honest, that sounds so. I know because I took like one module when I was in college. I took one module in Italian, thinking this would be cool. I'll have a basic idea in Italian, and it wasn't actually like a
Yeah.
basic course in Italian. It was all about like Italian like literature, and they were trying to get us to
Mm.
study Dante's Inferno, Dante's Inferno in Italian, and
Yeah.
I didn't know any Italian at all, like none. I didn't even know how to say hello. Like I just knew the hand gestures, and that was it. And then I realized that those weren't correct, and also I shouldn't do those. And so I was just like, okay, fuck. The one thing I thought I knew about Italy, all out the window. And
Dante's Inferno isn't even in
Dante's
modern
Inferno.
Italian. It's in like a dialect.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
is it, like a Florentine dialect of Italian or something
This
like that?
fucking middle agey shit. I don't know. I can't even fucking. I can't. I can't. And I couldn't. I couldn't. I think I ended up like
Yeah.
for like all of my like exams and stuff like that. I think I pretty much found the answers to it like on like Spark Notes or something like that.
Yeah.
Google Translate I think was
I
starting
just
to become a
wrote an
thing as well.
essay actually about Dante's Inferno
Oh
and
really?
the impact of
You,
Islam.
you probably know
Yeah,
way more about it than I do. Then to be honest with you, because yeah, just went in one
probably,
ear
but
and out
that's
the
just
other.
because I read it so recently.
Yeah. Did you read it in Florentine Italian or middle-aged Florentine Italian, or did you read
No,
the?
I
You did the sensible thing
I
and
read
read the
it in
translation.
Latin and English.
You read it in Latin, motherfucker. There you go.
Yeah.
You just one upped me, motherfucker. I no, I am. I'm actually. It's very interesting that you talk about this because like we're talking about education and you're sort of like you're preparing for a life of being just like a high school teacher. Just can I just check before we go any further? High school in Sweden. What age does that
Yeah.
cover? Is that kind of the same as like the U.S. kind of high school? Like there's middle school. There's like a
Yeah, it's
or
what is it, like 15 to 18?
okay, yeah. So it's pretty much. I think that's pretty much the same as the kind of US one, or maybe they've got like 15 to
Yeah.
17 or something. But in Ireland, we just have primary school, primary school
Mm.
and secondary school, so it's just the two. Primary school is from maybe the age of like 4 or 5 until like 11 or 12, and then from 11 or 12 until 17 or 18, it's secondary school.
Mm.
And I really wanted to become a secondary school teacher actually originally, which is yeah roughly the equivalent to like high school, but a little bit of a larger age range, I suppose. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I went to college and I took like an arts degree, studying a few different subjects. Because you're expected to teach two subjects as a secondary school teacher, so I chose English and music, and those were
Hmm.
going to be the two subjects that I would do, and I'd kind of fuck around and play with some languages, you know. So I took that like Italian course, I took a couple of modules in like psychology and stuff like that, just because I was in college and I kind of wanted to like fuck around and have a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
And but you know, basically by the time I got to finishing college, um, if you want the qualifications to become a secondary school teacher in Ireland now, you have to do a course called the a Masters in Professional Education, and the course takes 2 years. It's full time, and it costs between €10,000 and €12,000. And
Hmm.
I was just like, I don't fucking have that money. There's no way I can like afford to pay that. Like, yeah, there's just no way I can afford to pay that at all.
Yeah.
It's just not gonna happen. So yeah, it was kind of shitty, just to be kind of hit by that like economic reality that kind of completely just like shut down any possibility of becoming a teacher,
Yeah.
even in like the public education system, you know. So that was pretty fucked up. So anyway, then I just went and got a job in like fucking a few different places. I was working like in a pizza place, working at Domino's, worked in like a computer shop. I
Yeah.
worked in like Dixon's, little just like a few random sort of shops, and I eventually became like an English language teacher, which before the stream we were talking about how there's like an infamously low barrier for
Yeah.
entry. Which was a little bit of, let's say, a silver medal with the original
Yeah.
ambition. But yeah, it's kind of shady. I don't know how the conditions are for teachers, like high school teachers and stuff like that, in Sweden. Is it favorable? Is it pretty good, or do they make it kind of difficult? Because in Ireland in 2010, after the recession came in, they
Mm.
they lowered teacher salaries like really like significantly, and they said they were going to bring it back up pretty soon, and they never did. So what they
Yeah.
did was they put up more barriers to get into teaching, and then even in teaching, they lowered the salary like significantly, like by like 5,000 or something like that per year, and
Yeah. You know,
they
they
never
did
brought
pretty
it
much
up.
the same thing here,
Oh,
actually.
really?
It's yeah, it's they've made
Yeah,
it more difficult to become a teacher, so you have to do more education, and
yeah,
like the exams and everything is stricter and more difficult. But the wages have been stagnant for like
yeah,
20 years.
yeah, yeah. It's the same. It's the exact same here, and
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
not going
I
anywhere.
feel like it really like speaks to it. Like I have 50 something thousand subscribers on YouTube, right?
Mm.
I'm not even at the point where I get the fucking silver plaque on my wall, right? But I'm already at the point where like within reach, I could get the same wage from YouTube as I could from a high school teacher gig.
It's so crazy. That's unbelievable. And
Yeah,
how's the
like you don't
contracts?
earn much.
Do you at
What?
least have like stable kind of contracts? Can you get a job and it's kind of a job for life, or is it like 6 month contract if you're lucky, maybe part time, working like
No,
covering people, or
because no, I mean the work like the labor market is pretty favorable because of the fact that wages are so low and the barriers to entry are so high. There are
mm,
very few qualified teachers. So I mean, pretty much every school is just fighting over you,
wow,
um, which I mean, it's not good for the students, and it's kind of it's
yeah,
gotten to this point where okay, a little bit of background
please.
first on the Swedish education system. Um, so Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were kind of winning the Cold War, and Sweden was like, hey, that's pretty sexy. And so we were like, let's take the social democratic model that we've had and that has worked for 100 years, and let's just do away with it. Let's just not have it anymore. And so we decentralized, we privatized, and we established something called the new, what's it called? The new public management. That's it.
Mm.
New public management is kind of like this compromise position between social democracy and neoliberalism, where the liberals are saying, let's privatize education, let's privatize healthcare, let's privatize pharmacies, let's privatize everything. And then the social democrats say, we're not going to privatize it. It's going to stay public, but we're going to let these publicly owned companies and institutions act as if they were private companies. So they're going to follow the market and compete in the market for profit. And so we're going to have like charter schools and municipal schools, but they're going to be pretty much indistinguishable from each other. Both are going to receive tax money, or both are paid through with taxes. The difference is municipal schools, all the taxes go to funding the schools, and in charter schools, the taxes go to lining the pockets of whoever owns the school. But functionally, they're the same, right? And both of the schools have to compete in this market. They have to compete for students because we have school choice, and they have to compete for teachers because there are no teachers.
Mm.
Um, so we're in this situation now where a lot of teachers are they work at a school for maybe a few months, and then they get an offer from a school somewhere else. They're saying like, "Hey, we'll give you a higher starting wage," and so you pack up your bags and you leave and you work at a different school, and then another school, maybe even the first one that you worked at before, is like, "Hey, we've got higher, starting wages for teachers now," and then you pack up your bags and you move, and so you kind of move around between like different municipalities in the same city, right? You like don't
Mm.
even move apartments or anything. You just change where you work every couple of months because the starting wages keep going up, but the normal wages for the teachers who stick around remain the same. So if you don't quit your job, you're losing money.
Wow. Wow.
And it's really terrible for the students because they have to fucking switch their teachers around every couple of months
Yeah.
instead of having the same teacher for their entire journey through high school.
Mm.
Because like I had the same English teacher in high school when I started as when I left, like, and I loved my teachers
Mm.
because I had them for 2 years, but I had a couple of teachers who I only knew for like a few months, and I don't even know their names anymore.
Yeah.
Like, and it sucks because you don't bond with them, and if you don't bond with your teacher, you don't feel like you have like a friendly working relationship with your teacher. Like, that makes it more difficult to learn stuff,
Yeah.
and it
Definitely.
makes it more difficult for you to be motivated to learn things.
Mm.
It's not
Mm.
a good situation for the students at all,
Mm.
or for the teachers for that matter.
Mm. That's actually it's really interesting the way you described that because in Ireland it's almost like the complete opposite. As in, like you can't like you no nobody can get jobs. Like nobody can get jobs. Like most teachers who are like fully qualified, they come out of that course I was talking about earlier, like the professional masters in education.
No.
Most of them come out and they can't get a job anywhere. The schools just hold on to the teachers that they have for dear life, like forever. And
Mm.
even if you want to get your foot in the door of a school, it's all about who you know. Like it's
Yeah.
only about who you know. Like if you don't know people who are in the school, like high level in the school, like the principals or whatever, then you're not gonna get a job there. Like, or if you don't have like I don't know, like a family member who's either close to the school, like from through like some parents association, or actually directly like
Mm.
employed by the school, like you're not getting work there, and that actually makes it really really difficult as well for people who don't have a history in like education to work anywhere because you're in that professional masters of education. Even just to get the education, you need to get two or three. I can't remember now. It's two or three schools to agree to take you on as like a trading student, where basically you'll just work for free for them for like a couple of years. You just
Yeah.
work for free, a few hours, maybe like 1 day a week or something like that. Maybe it's 2 days a week. And so you already need to be very close with the school, and it's very kind of like it's a system kind of basically based on nepotism, and
Yeah.
it's really fucked up here in Ireland. So, yeah, I don't
You know
know,
how
it sucks.
when you ask your grandpa how he got his first job.
Mm.
And it says, "Well, Sonny, I walked right up into that bank and I told the bank manager, I want you to give me a job." And then the bank manager said, "I like to cut your job. You're hired." That's basically what it's like to be a teacher in Sweden. You can just
Holy
go up to
shit.
any fucking school and be like, "I
Stroll
want
in.
a job." And then they're like, "Thank fucking God, we've needed a social studies teacher for like 6 months. We've only had substitutes." Because
Holy
like no
shit.
one wants to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Like no one fucking voluntarily chooses to become a teacher because the
Mm.
wage is shit and you have to
Yeah.
work like 50, 60 hours a week. Like it's insane.
Mm.
Because you not only do you have to work 8 hours at the school, you then have to work like 6 hours at home.
Yeah, that's right. Correcting homework, planning lessons.
Yeah.
And you're also like expected to do a lot of like after school. Well, I don't know how it is in Sweden, but in Ireland
you're,
anyway, it's
you're
definitely
required to work at home. Like
yeah,
you're not even just expected, like you're literally legally required to work at home as well.
yeah. Do they kind of like pressure teachers to do like after school activities as well? Like for example, going to like I don't know school concerts or school sports events or things like that, because that's another kind of like pressure point for other teachers here as well in Ireland. Like they're kind of forced to, but it's like you
Mm.
don't need to like by your contract, but if you don't, they're not going to renew your contract and you'll only work for 6 months. So
Yeah. Maybe not as much in high school,
yeah,
but
good.
maybe in primary school. I don't
Yeah.
know, but I mean, if there was anything like that, it would be during work hours.
Mm, mm.
I don't
Well,
think
it's
there would
better.
be like anything like that after. But I don't know. I've never had to do anything like that.
Well, we can
But yeah,
check in a couple of
you have to
years.
do all the homework and the planning and everything. Like you have to do fucking
Yeah.
lesson plans and all that shit. Like when
Takes
you're a
a long
student, you
time.
don't think about it, but when when you're a teacher, it's
Yeah.
takes a long time.
Yeah, like literally, like the first few times in particular when you're planning out lessons, it'll take you as long as the lesson. Like if you're doing like a
Yeah.
class that's like 40 minutes, it'll take you 40 minutes to plan that out because you're doing like minute by minute. Here's what I'm going to go to, and here's what I'm going to, and
Yeah.
like you're planning out really stupid things. Like you're planning out little things like, okay, now I'm going to like stand up, or well, you're making notes to yourself and saying like, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to tell the students to do that and I'm going to
Yeah.
elicit questions. And there's so much detail in it, and I don't think a lot of people realize just how much planning and work goes into being a teacher.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough.
My
It's tough going.
my mentors. So I was working at um so, during education. You get to like do like practice work at real high schools
Mm,
where like essentially the way it works is like you have a course as part of the program where you work at a school for a month and then
for
like
free.
that's
Yeah.
your grade. Yeah.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, we have that as well. It's throughout the school year though. I think it's like one or
yeah.
2 days a week rather than for like a month or two.
Okay. Yes, I had a mentor at the school where I practiced that. And he told me that like when you first start out as a teacher, you do the thing where you're meticulously planning every minute of every lesson.
Mm,
And then after you've worked as a teacher for like 8 years, you do what's called doorway education, where when you step over the doorway, I don't know what the correct translation would be, but it's like the where the yeah, I guess doorway.
mm.
Like when you step over the threshold, um, that's when you figure out what you're gonna teach today. It's like because
You're
you're
just
so
responding.
used to all
Yeah.
this thing, you
Y-
just have all the criteria and all the grades and everything in your head,
Yeah. You've got like an
and
armory
you've
of
done
like
this course before and all these
yeah,
things. And
yeah. And you're like turn to page 23 and you know exactly what's on page 23. Like you've just got it
yeah.
memorized like the back of your hand. You've got a load of activity filler activities as well. Like
Oh yeah.
for that's a big thing I had to learn as well. Like filler activities like for like when the room goes silent and people are just sort of like looking at you. You see big eyes like staring at you and you're like, oh shit, what do I do? It's like that,
Yeah.
those it kind of feels like those dreams that people have. Like that like stereotypical or excuse me, that sort of that kind of dream that people have where like they're naked and they're in like school or something like that and they're like, oh shit, why am I not wearing any clothes, and they're on an exam or something like that. It kind of
Yeah.
feels like that. You're just like, oh shit, they've caught me without my clothes on. I'm just gonna everyone's staring at me. This is so strange. What am I gonna do? And then you sort of like you figure it out. You figure out you've got some sort of like go-to activities whether those are like
Yeah.
games or learning activities, as we as we would call them. But we know what they're really about. But
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, cool. It's kind of fucked up that they're also doing that in Sweden, where they just get students to do unpaid labor and to work for free and teach all these
Yeah.
kids. But
Oh yeah. I've done a lot of unpaid labor.
and actually, you're paying to do it as well. You're paying for the course. Like,
Oh no, no, we have free education.
oh, all right. Well, just
Technically, I
shove
get
that in my
paid.
face.
I get paid $300 a month to go to college.
Oh shit, you get that as well. Like, do you get that even if you're making a little bit of money as well? Like, if you're like, you're making a little bit of money on like YouTube or just working a part time job or something, do you still get that as well?
You only get it if you make less than $5,000 a month. Uh,
that's pretty. That's a pretty substantial amount.
yeah.
So you're
No,
good.
it's a lot of money, but yeah, no, I make nowhere near $5,000 a month. So, I get the student allowance.
Jesus Christ, I can't even imagine that. Yeah, I had to work. I had to work my whole way through college. I was like flipping pizzas the second I was out.
Yeah.
Instead of class, I was just flipping pizzas and dominoes and shit like that, and it was just yeah. I do sort of like wonder like if I wasn't working, would that have changed things? Like would my grades have been better?
Mm.
Would I've been able to participate like in campus life or something like that, or have some like a proper like student experience? A kind of like partying kind of experience, which I just didn't have. So it was just like working pretty much all
Mm.
the time, and yeah, yeah. Do you think that that's going to stick around in Sweden, or do you think that that's kind of on the way out? I know we before we got started, we were talking about the erosion of social democracy in Sweden in favor of
Yeah.
neoliberalism. Do you think that that's on the way out, or how do you see that developing?
I think student allowance is one of those things where it's it's so popular. I can't imagine that they would get rid of it
Hmm.
because I think even though we don't give a shit about teachers, we do place education on this pedestal.
Hmm.
Like we do respect education and we do recognize that education is important. We just don't give a shit about the teachers who make it possible.
Oh shit.
Um, I mean, partly to blame are I would say the unions,
Hmm.
because the teachers unions, we have two main ones, with very confusing names. One of them is the uh, Lärarförbundet, which is the teachers union, and then there is Lärarnas riksförbund, which is the teachers' Reich union, like the realm, the nation, like the national teachers union,
Hmm.
basically. But the teachers union is usually mostly for primary school, and then the national teachers union is for high school. But they both do both. Like you could be a member of either. It's very confusing
Hmm.
why we have two, but uh, neither of them are particularly like militant. Like they're both pretty passive.
Hmm.
I got like a membership. They have like this newspaper thing that they send you when you're a member, and one of the articles was like someone had sent in a question like why don't we go on strike to demand better wages, and then the reply was something like it's like this kind of like pseudo racist thing about like in Argentina they go on strikes every day and it's really chaotic, but in Sweden we just don't have a strike culture.
Hmm.
It's
That's
like
just Quisling motherfuckers. Get the fuck out.
yeah, it's like, oh, we don't have a strike culture. Yeah, our culture is just fucking
We just chill.
laying just
We just
laying
vibe.
down and taking it. It's like,
we
oh yes, please lower my wage even more.
give it
Why
to
am I
me.
even in a union?
I fucking hate that so much because it's the exact same in Ireland as well. Like, it's actually probably better in Sweden. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's so bad in Ireland. Like, all the unions are just so conservative. Like, I think back, like, right in the 1960s in Ireland, we had the highest union membership of any country in Europe. It was
Hmm.
really strong. We had a really strong trade union culture, and then the trade unions just fucking sold out. Like in
Yeah.
basically the late 80s, early 90s, they brought in the Industrial Relations Acts, which was like a social partnership program whereby They put loads of restrictions on any kind of industrial action, and everything would happen just through, conversations, and we wouldn't strike anymore, and everything was just going to be relaxed, and there's no class divide here, there's no more class struggle, we're all friends. The Soviet Union's fault, like literally it came in 1991, so
Yeah.
that's probably a sign of the times as well, in some ways. So it's really shitty. It's the same thing that you're talking about there. Like the teachers' union is just such a joke here in Ireland, and they fuck over the younger generation as well. Like the teachers' union approves of this massive pay cut that came in around 2010, 2011, for new teachers. I think, now I might be getting the numbers slightly wrong. But if I'm not mistaken, I think that the starting wage for a teacher before this cut was something like between 35 or 38,000 euro per year.
Yeah.
Before this came in, right? And then, and this is providing you can get like a full-time permanent contract. A lot of people will be working part-time, they'd be working like 6-month contracts, they wouldn't be on like the full like tenure kind of track. But if you could get that, then it'd be like 35 to 38,000. Afterwards it was dropped by something like, I think it was about 8,000 it got dropped by. So you had people getting between 27 and 30,000 after that. So that's a massive amount. And the people who voted on that were people who would have been much higher up on the pay scale anyway. Like they didn't need to worry about that. They're having a great time. So it's like they climbed up this ladder. They used the unions previously in previous decades to climb up this like ladder, and then they just pulled it up behind them and said fuck you to all like new teachers. And yeah, it's, as you said earlier, like it's this issue where they kind of I don't know. They've put up the barriers. They've made it much harder. It's much more difficult to access these
Yeah.
becoming a teacher. But
Very recently, we had a law, a new law which limited um, striking. I maybe someone in the comments is from Sweden and can remember.
mm,
It just slipped my mind what exactly it was, but it was something along the lines of every workplace has a union, right? Like an official union.
mm,
And that is the union which like 51% of the workers are member of,
mm,
right? Or like 51% of the unionized workers are a member of, right? That's the official union. And the 49% who are part of a different union, they're not allowed to strike without the approval of the official union.
wow.
So if 51% of the workers are members of like the social democratic, like super liberal, like super conservative union, um, and they're saying like, no, don't go on strike, you know, just keep working hard and pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Mm,
And then the 49% are part of like the syndicalist union or something,
mm,
and they want to go on strike. They're legally not allowed to go on strike because
wow.
the majority union is saying no.
Yeah. That shit really takes a toll. Like it really takes a massive toll when you like roll back on those workers' rights and stuff like that. Like we can't do anything like sympathetic strikes or anything like that. For example,
Yeah.
sympathetic strikes, just for people maybe who are listening on this who don't know what that is. It's when you strike for like another company, or for another business, or maybe another like branch of your business, the business that you're working for. So for example, I work in the supermarket Tesco. I see the other guys are having a really tough time over in another supermarket, like Lidl or something, and they're going on strike on Monday. So we decide, in solidarity with them, we'll strike with them, and that's fully illegal now. You can't do that in Ireland under no circumstances. In terms of normal strikes, if you want to have like just a normal strike, just getting a few people outside to get the pickets up and all this sort of stuff, uh, that's incredibly difficult to do. It takes about a week to make that happen. So let's say something really fucked up happens like on Monday one week, and you're really like furious and you want to go storm out and like do it the next day or something. You can't.
Mm.
It takes about 7 days to pass that. You've got to do like these secret ballots, which by the way have to be conducted in secret, and most workplaces aren't unionized. So it has to happen like on your own time. So like you need to like organize the time to do like the secret ballot to make that happen outside of work hours, using sort of unofficial channels to make that even happen. Like maybe getting like somehow on this week, if you want to make a strike happen, you need to like gather up all the people from like your workplace, outside of working hours, whether that's just going to a bar, going to a pub, something like that, or whatever it might be. And then it's going to be next Monday before that strike actually happens. So as you can imagine, like people are not quite as angry anymore about the
Yeah.
thing which initially sparked that strike. And so, it kind of disarms people in a way, and defangs and declaws the workers really intensely. And yeah, it's fucked up. It's fucked up. And like these people like in these unions, they would have been, quite socialistic beforehand, in previous decades, but they just became cozy. They're, the labor aristocracy, I suppose, is what's they've been called before historically, like in communist literature and Marxist literature and stuff like that. This sort of layer of the working class that manages to get very cozy with the capitalists and is kind of
Mm.
provided all of these benefits and perks uh, by playing along to their tune, and they did, to the detriment of the rest of the working class, and it fucking sucks.
Yeah.
So, I hope that Sweden doesn't go fully in that direction. Hopefully, you'll have like a Marxist socialist revolution soon, and we won't need to even have this conversation. But in the meantime, I hope you can at least cling on to the maybe meager, eroded workers' rights that you do have, because it gets really bad, and it can get a lot worse.
Yeah. I mean, looking at like election polling, so we had our last election was in 2018, so we're gonna have a new general election in 2022.
Mm,
Our the Socialist Party, which is called the Left Party, got 8%
mm.
in 2018. Right now, they're polling at 12%.
And when we say
Um,
socialist, would you consider them like an actual decent socialist party, or kind of mostly just social democratic, or like do you see them favorably, or how do you
they're
sort of see it?
they're very multi-tendency.
Okay, so like Big
They're
Tent
kind of like a
lefts.
yeah, kind of like a big tent leftist.
Mm, okay.
So in Gothenburg, where I live, the left party is there are a lot of communists in the left party, a lot of like old school like Marxists and Marxist Leninists from who were around in like the 70s and stuff.
Mm,
But then in other parts of the country, you have very social democratic branches of the left party,
mm,
or very like reformist and incrementalist.
mm.
Nationally, it's somewhere in between, where they're critical of the Social Democratic Party, but they're not like Marxist, not
Right.
nation
Yeah.
nationally. But there are like local branches of the party that are still far left,
Mm, mm.
which is good.
Yeah. Definitely.
And
Definitely. So do you
and
see
I
them?
think I
Y-
think
y-
I think I think they're a party that can be pushed to the left with
mm,
more effort. I really don't see any leftist alternative to them, like the Communist Party or anything like that. I don't see them winning any seats in parliament anytime soon.
mm,
I really don't think that's gonna happen. And like they
mm,
don't have any much of public support or anything. There is like a syndicalist organization which has been doing some grassroots work. They've been like they were working with the dock workers union and that kind of stuff. Um, so that kind of like on the whole unionist like on the grassroots kind of level,
mm,
they've been doing some good work and they've been like spreading awareness of issues and like the strike right, what is it, right to strike I think,
mm,
yeah, like like workers rights and that kind of thing.
mm.
And the left party kind of hooked on to that because like the syndicalists started like spreading awareness and they started like protests and all these things, and then the left party was like, oh wow, this is like something that's engaging people, and then they like slapped their logo on that, like we support the dock workers
Yeah.
union. But the syndicalists were there first, so
I hate that shit so much. It's so fucking cynical when like these kind of like vague Big Ten leftist organizations see something's working, and then they'll come on and just slap their sticker on it, and then they'll say like, "Oh yes, we have spearheaded this movement," when it's
yeah.
clearly just, it's clearly not. It's clearly like the Marxists or the anarcho syndicalists or whoever it might be. And
Yeah.
yeah, we yeah we it, you know it sounds very similar to kind of like Sinn Féin in Ireland as well. And actually, even what you're saying about like there being like earlier sort of there are still remaining like parts of the organization which would be like very much on the far lefts. But at the same time, you do still get people who are quite social democratic and yeah, like I don't know, it's kind of a the problem with these kind of big tent organizations, and without that sort of clear strategy forward, they just find themselves sort of falling into like movementism. They kind of just go with whatever's popular, and they don't have a clear path forward. And yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts actually on that note on the concept of like kind of big left parties? I suppose these kind of like ideas of like left unity and stuff like that. I think it's kind of relevant, and I think it's kind of interesting. I see some people like asking in the chat as well, like about things like
Mm.
anarchism and stuff like that. And do you think that this is something to be encouraged, or do you think that people should kind of I don't want to say like stay in their lane, but like stick to the organizations which more accurately reflect their own particular ideologies?
Uh, I think it's an interesting question, but I think as I've gotten to know more people and I've gotten more involved in leftist spaces over the years, I can't really I can't really say anything against leftist unity. I think the only way for us to get anything done is to put our differences aside when we're fighting a common enemy.
Mm,
And I do think that cooperation between Marxists and anarchists is possible. Um, like I have plenty of anarchist friends,
mm,
and like there have been plenty of organizations that have worked together who have not been ideologically similar, but for various different causes and various different um, events, they've just had their interests aligned and they've worked together.
mm.
So I do think that I think that um, Die Linke in Germany,
Oh yeah, yeah.
they have internal caucuses. So they have various different organizations within their own party who all have their own ideologies and agendas and that kind of thing. And they're just kind of allowed to exist there. And even though they disagree with each other, they're all united in this big tent left party.
Mm,
I think that's a good way to organize it. Um, and I think when you're talking about like trying to influence national politics, trying to influence parliament, and when you're doing electoralism, I think big tent left is a good way to do it.
yeah. I think there's definitely something to that. I sort of I wonder is it a little bit confusing kind of like when we talk about, because like if it's a party it kind of locks you in to that organization. But one thing I'm noticing that in Ireland here, like specifically here in Ireland, is that we have, like, for example, like unions. We're actually every left wing party in Ireland is really excited about this new community and tenants union. It's actually called the Community Action Tenants Union.
Mm-hmm.
CATU is what it's called. Um, I think it kind of the moment it popped up, it kind of popped up this year, and it's really exciting because basically everybody lost their jobs, so nobody can work in like traditional unions anymore. Like that's not really possible, like in workers unions. But also there was a wall that I kind of mentioned the frustration with unions, especially since the 1991 Industrial Relations Act came in, and you can't do strikes, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do anything really. The leadership of the unions is incredibly conservative, and so actually CATU is, if I'm not mistaken, it's not even registered like as a trade union. It's registered as as basically like a non-profit organization, that kind of structure. But that basically means that the laws that apply to unions don't apply to people organizing through CATU. And what's interesting about this is that this is kind of an experience of something like left unity. Like you have like anarchists and Marxist Leninists and Trotskyists and social democrats and like even just standard liberals like working together on these kinds, even the occasional conservative like working on these kinds of things in terms
Yeah.
of like class solidarity. and it's very interesting. You know, it's very interesting kind of seeing that happen. I don't know how I feel about like a party as such, because I think a party might
Mm.
lock you in, but I suppose it would depend on like how it works in terms of like the caucuses and that. The only sort of reference point that I'm thinking of is the, you know, like the DSA. I think a lot of people are very critical and concerned with the DSA and how that's sort of played out. And
Mm.
if I'm not mistaken, I think that nominally they might have some kind of Marxist caucuses, but at the same time, there's issues like they don't allow for any organization based along like Marxist principles. Like you can't talk about like democratic centralism or anything like that. So it kind of puts up walls to the organizing that, you know, let's say a Marxist or a Marxist Leninist or like a Maoist or something might want to, you know, engage in. And so I suppose that kind of causes some issues, and I suppose everybody would need to, let's say, sacrifice some of their beliefs and their ideological convictions in order to be part of it. But yeah, as you said, like if we're talking about like electoral politics, there might be a different kind of conversation to have around these issues, you know.
Mm. I don't really know too much about the DSA. I have a friend who's an active member there who has brought up some issues about like there are like kind of social democrats and things in the DSA, but
Mm.
I've also heard that there are a lot of anarchists and Marxists in the DSA.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of it depends on where you are and which like local group you're in. I think they're a pretty decentralized organization. I think every like local branch does think pretty differently.
Mm.
Um, but I think an interesting way to go about left unity might be to set up these organizations with very specific goals, like for instance, yeah, squatting or like squatters' rights or rent striking or these kind of things. Setting up those like specific organizations and making those like left unity
Mm.
and open and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that way you can have like everyone who agrees with this policy, like this very specific policy, like squatters' rights, they can join this organization and they can organize and they can work with them on this. And then you can have a different political organizations around syndicalism versus vanguardism or whatever.
Mm.
But for the specific issues, you can all work together because there's just this one big tent organization that's all doing, um, you know, only doing this one specific issue.
Mm.
That might be a way to go about it. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, there's definitely a lot of work that can be done together in terms of like specific issues and single issue kind of stuff. Like, there's definitely
Yeah,
a lot of important work to be done there, and a lot of. I think it's useful to have like bridges between the different organizations and the, sects or whatever you want to call it. You know, just the different
I think
groups on the
yeah,
left. You know, I think it's really
I
useful to
think
have
it's
that.
very counterproductive to just split and then never interact with each other and to just be hostile.
Oh
I
Jesus.
think
I'm having flashbacks of like Irish history right now, the Republican
yeah,
struggle. It's just like okay, I left your party. Okay, now I'm gonna kill everybody in the previous party.
yeah.
That's like the entire history of the Republican movement in Ireland is so fucking shitty. Oh my god.
Spending way too much time fighting your own side that you forget about the enemy.
Exactly, and only that. And there were actually points where, like, I'm thinking like the IRA, like the official IRA, the Irish Republican Socialist Party, the provisional IRA, all these groups. There were like moments where they would rather work with the UVF, the Ulster Volunteer Force,
Mm.
the literal fascists who served British imperialism. They would rather work with them than work with other, Marxist Leninist organizations. And like they literally like
Yeah.
they were like killing each other. They were just like, if you look at like the death toll from like the Troubles, for example, in Ireland between like the
Mm.
70s and the 90s, it's like half the people who were killed were literally just Republicans. Just like Republicans. And like I don't know, I think it's like half Republicans, a quarter of the people who were killed were actually like British troops, and then like a quarter were just like civilians. So it's fucking shameful. Like
Yeah.
when you think like this is kind of where it goes. I suppose this history and this memory kind of predisposes me in some ways towards being, I don't want to say like pro left unity, but at least pro left cooperation. You know.
Yeah. I think what kind of there are many things that disillusion me with Marxism Leninism.
Mm,
One of the reasons, I mean, there are quite a lot of reasons why I don't call myself a Marxist Leninist anymore.
mm,
One of them is just for the fact that I feel like it's unnecessary to label myself that way. I have this whole video about boxing yourself in ideologically,
I
and
remember. Yeah, it's interesting.
yeah. But one of the things that disillusioned me with Marxist-Leninist parties, and I think your chat might get quite upset with me about this, is um, as a member of like a left Marxist-Leninist organization,
Hmm.
you kind of eventually become aware that like there are like 20 other Marxist-Leninist organizations in your country, and they all basically want to do the same thing, but they all hate each other.
Oh yeah.
And
Yep.
it's like, oh, well, this party split from this party in 1961 because the leader at that point, he said like Mao was fat, and so now they hate each other and they will never work together, and
Oh
they
god.
just fuck each other up, and they
Yeah.
refuse to ever cooperate or be in the same room together.
Yeah.
And like, oh, this guy, he made his own party because he disagreed about the fucking agricultural policy of Stalin in 1931. And it's like all these random shits that
Oh
led
my
to
god.
splits, and then all these different parties still exist, and they all, for no reason, just refuse to work together. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I've been drawn more into the Big Tent party.
I can definitely
Um,
feel you. It's in Ireland. It's more like, oh well, there's this Marxist party, and then there's other Marxist party, and they don't really get along that well together because like the founding member was killed by a member of the other party, and like so there's and people like would have still like lived through that, and they would actually like have experienced that, and like they would have known like they would have known like who the killer was, and they would have known what had
yeah,
happened there, and so I suppose like in that case, in that sense, it's a lot more like personal than it is like political in some ways.
yeah,
Um, yeah, but even then, it's extremely frustrating that you have like these kind of personal disputes dominating a political party,
yeah.
which seems kind of silly, you
And
know.
it's like especially frustrating when you think about it, because it's like, okay, you have like four communist parties running for every election. If there was just one communist party and you combined all those votes, they might actually win a seat somewhere, but they
Mm,
don't, because there are four of them and
yeah,
no one figures
split the
out
vote.
which one to vote for.
Mm.
It's like, do I vote for the Communist Party of Sweden or do I vote for the Communist Party parenthesis Sweden? It's like,
Communist Party
or do
Sweden
I vote
ML.
for the Swedish Communist Party or the Communist Party of the nation of Sweden? Or it's like,
Yeah,
it's yeah, it's just stupid.
the alphabet soup group. Yeah,
Yeah, it really is alphabet soup.
yeah. Yeah, I know the frustration. I know it all too well. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like coming like from this perspective, like in Ireland with the troubles and with like the armed struggle, I do understand the splits because of the violence between different groups, and I can understand like, oh, okay, this person, like your best friend, was killed by someone from the other party. I can kind of understand why you don't want to be pals with these this other
Yeah.
group, even if that's like incorrect, and that's kind of almost like a liberal kind of perspective where you're just focusing on like interpersonal relations. I can understand it, even if I don't necessarily 100%. You know,
Yeah.
if that wouldn't be the approach that I would take, if you know what I mean. But yeah, but what you said is really relevant and really important about how it's really silly stuff. It's like, well, Stalin said this one thing in 1935, and I disagree with that, and so let's just separate. Let's just go. Okay,
Uh,
I disagree on this notion of like the state of all people or whatever, and so like, okay, let's split. We're gonna have to split. That's it. We're gone. We're done. New party, Communist Party of Sweden ML, whatever, and yeah, it's kind of a mess.
yeah.
But, yeah, but I'm sorry I cut you off. You were gonna say you had some other issues with being part of Marxist-Leninist organizations.
Well, I don't even know if we need to get into that
Oh
in this
yeah, yeah.
stream.
No,
It's
if you don't want it, don't worry.
yeah. No, I just over time, I just I felt like I needed to broaden my perspective a bit.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know what it was, but like I can't I felt I started feeling really weird about being in a party that like officially and on paper didn't allow for dissenting opinions, um and like
Yeah,
a
no
lot of the
factionalism.
people in the party, they hated anarchists and they hated democratic socialism, and they just they had so much animosity toward other leftists.
Mm,
But being, politically active, I knew a lot of leftists from other political tendencies,
mm,
and it felt really weird for me to be in a party with so much animosity toward other leftist tendencies, and like especially anarchists. Like the Communist Party of Sweden fucking hates anarchists.
really.
Yeah.
Are there many anarchists in Sweden? I wonder maybe there's like an antagonistic kind of relationship between communists and
Um,
anarchists generally, or there.
well, but the youth organizations, RKU and Syndicalist Youth, they have like kind of good relations. Like they kind of work together sometimes, but the main party for some reason have this kind of vendetta
Hmm.
against anarchism.
It's really
But
strange. We don't have the
yeah,
anarchists.
no, and it just um,
We don't have this issue with
no,
anarchism here. It's Trotskyism. We it's
yeah,
Trotskyist. It's the Trotskyists versus the Marxist Leninists, and that's like the big, really big divide here. Because Trotskyists
yeah,
kind of like Trotskyists kind of dominate the left in Ireland. Like all the big socialist organizations are Trotskyists, and
mm,
yeah, and even like amongst the Trotskyists, there's like about 20 different parties and organizations and splits of them. Yeah, so well, anyway,
mm,
it's a mess. The Irish left is incredibly fractured, but yeah,
yeah,
as it is everywhere, I suppose.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, come here to me. There was a question in the chat here. I just wanted to ask you thoughts on this. Thoughts on Marxism, Leninism, and anti-imperialism applied in Sweden. So this is one for you, Conrad. This is from Kamrat QP.
Well, we we had a prime minister named Olof Palme who opposed the war in Vietnam, and he sided with the North and Viet Minh, and he was mysteriously assassinated
Oh.
after doing so. But yeah, he was like the first Western leader to stand up against the United States and to say that the war in Vietnam wasn't okay.
Mm,
Um,
pretty nice.
yeah, that was nice for while it lasted. Um, I and like we Sweden didn't join NATO and tried to stay neutral during the Cold War, but we have this thing in Swedish history where we try to be neutral, but we're always bullied into not being neutral.
Kind of
Like
like
during
Ireland, to be
World War
honest.
II,
Yeah.
we basically helped the Nazis a lot more than we probably should have. But
Yeah.
we, at the time, we were doing what we thought we had to do in order to not be invaded, and we were, hiding Norwegian resistance army in our woods, and we were hiding Danish Jews in our cities, trying to save people. But at the same time, we also helped facilitate the invasion of Norway by like allowing German troops to use Swedish railways. So uh,
Yeah.
it was, but yeah, the same thing has happened with the United States. We're like, we try to be neutral in conflicts. We try not to side with NATO or join NATO and that kind of thing. But then they're like, they want to buy our jet planes and they want to, they want us to bomb Libya and all these things. And we kind of
Mm,
go along with it. So we're not exactly anti-imperialist, and we also, of course, definitely benefit from third world labor. I mean, that's
yeah. Of
the only way social democracy can even exist.
course. Yeah.
But we have a little bit of a history of almost being anti-imperialist, so that's something.
Well, that's something at
But
least. It does. It reminds me, like in Ireland as well. Like we're nominally, nominally we are neutral, but in reality, like we've very much always been on the side of the West, and even now, like
mm,
we basically have like the U.S. airbase of Shannon Airport. In Shannon Airport, like it's just like it's just where the U.S. planes stop over before, so that they can go and bomb kids in the Middle East, and it's super fucked up. Like you have U.S. soldiers literally like walking around the village and shit, like in full like uniform as well, like military garb, military
Yeah.
attire, just like walking around the town and stuff like that. It's pretty fucked up, to be honest with you. They got
Someone in chat just wrote, most based anti-imperialist moment from Sweden was when the Communist Party gathered money for an anti-air missile launcher for the Viet Minh. I remember that.
class.
There's a poster in a bookstore that I visit sometimes, which is one of the original posters where they were encouraging people to donate money so that the Communist Party could buy an anti-air artillery for the Northern Vietnamese army.
Yeah,
And I think they did. I think they managed to do it.
that's extremely based Sweden.
It's just- I don't know where they got it from or who they bought it from, but they just bought anti-air artillery and then sent it to Vietnam, which is pretty cool.
It's very fucking cool, yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You know, I just realized we had like a doc of like a Google Doc of questions that we were going to discuss. And
Yeah,
it's like 70 minutes into this and we haven't even started them at all. We basically haven't done any Q&As. We've just been vibing. Taking
yeah,
it, which is nice because actually, to be honest, this is just what I need. I had kind of a rough day, so this is just exactly what I needed, and I appreciate you coming on and chilling with me. But I think we probably should actually talk about like socialism and education a little bit more. We talked a lot about education, but I think we should probably
yeah.
talk a little bit about like socialism and education, maybe a little bit more. Um,
All right.
just so people don't feel cheated from all of this, you know. So let's push forward with that. Why do we need explicitly socialist political education?
I think the answer to that is fairly simple. I mean, on in a collective from a collective perspective, when you're looking at an organization, you need your members and your leadership to be educated in Marxism and generally to be educated in history and in political science and in Marxism and in Leninism and in there's various different leftist tendencies. Even if you're running a Marxist Leninist organization, I think it's valuable to know about anarchism, to know
Mm,
what their tactics are, to know about their philosophies and their perspectives, because you never know when you run into a situation where it might be needed,
mm,
and there's no such thing as too much knowledge. So, but from an individual perspective, it's important to be educated in socialism and socialist tendencies because it gives you a lens through which you can perceive the reality around you. You become intrinsically aware of what everything means and what um, kind of the underlying meaning behind what's going on around you. So every every news story, every policy, everything that happens, you can kind of understand the the bigger picture
mm,
of why this is happening and what it means. Um, and not everything. You don't have to be educated on every single issue. Like you just kind of have to understand who does this benefit and which class does this benefit and what is the class interest in the situation.
mm.
And when you have that materialist perspective on things, it's a lot easier to be oriented in politics. So I think very much for the individual, it's very important to be educated.
Mm. It's a really good point that you raised about like when you're watching the news, who does this serve? You know, what is the class
Yeah.
character of this news report that I'm watching right now? What's the class character of? Because you know you're presented these kinds of they set the safe limits between CNN and Fox News. You know, so
Mhm.
you have the right wing and left wing of capitalism. That's
Yeah.
it. You don't have anything further that goes beyond or strays beyond those kind of boundaries. You know that they set. And
Yeah.
when we in school, I'm not sure how it is everywhere else, but at least when I think about it in school, we learn about things like propaganda. And when we learn
Mm.
about things like propaganda, it's always the Nazis primarily, and secondarily, it's the
Yeah.
Soviets. You
It's
know?
posters on the street that say like "Big
Yes,
Brother is watching you." That's what propaganda
exactly,
is.
exactly. It's not just that. It's not just the news. It's not just something that you're watching, you're reading in the Guardian. You know, the
Yeah.
Guardian, which is seemingly this progressive paper. Like it's not that. It's definitely not that. That's the left from this kind of, I suppose, liberal standpoint, you know. And
Mm.
it's important to be able to take apart these things, to understand how the media works, you know, how reality is
Yeah.
created, how they, you know, to quote Chomsky, problematically, I suppose, how they manufacture consent and understanding how that works, you
Mhm.
know. So yeah, I think it's really interesting and really useful, and I think it's very very difficult for people to understand what they see in their day-to-day lives as being ideologically charged, because I think for like from the 1990s onwards there's been this, you know, I suppose there's been this kind of sense that we're at the end of history, we're not really doing like political ideology anymore. We've kind of stripped reality of ideology in a strange way. Neoliberalism is just common sense, and we're no longer talking about grand overarching ideologies, the, you know, the liberation of the proletariat, or anything kind of grand like that. We're just operating in accordance with common sense, and it's extremely
Yeah.
difficult for people to see through that and to recognize actual capitalist propaganda, actual neoliberal propaganda, as it's being fed to you in the shows that you watch, in the
Yeah.
movies that you watch, in the education system, in the history class that you take in school. You know, it's very difficult for people to actually recognize and point those kinds of things out, you know. And that's where the explicitly socialist education or socialist political education can come in and show you where this kind of, I suppose, I don't know, indoctrination really has been taking place, where this brainwashing has been taking place specifically, you know.
Mm.
And it's very difficult to find that, you know. But you know, one thing that's kind of interesting to me is this I don't want to call it breadtube, but left wing YouTube space that's kind of opening up now, you know, because like you're providing education, like you're giving education to people on topics which are very like taboo, and you know, which we can't really
Mm.
talk about. And you know, I sort of think like in terms of like the Marxist conception of history, in terms of like historical materialism and how society has developed through different societies, and how I suppose the mode of production keeps on developing, the productive forces get stronger and stronger, and at a certain point we can no longer continue to produce in the same way that we produced before. You know, feudalism outlived its usefulness, so we moved on to capitalism.
Mhm.
Capitalism at one point will outlive its usefulness, and we'll have to move on to a future system. You know, and
Yeah.
there's this, I suppose, there's this
Neo
idea,
feudalism.
neo feudalism, which it kind of seems like that's the direction that it's going in right now,
Yeah.
which is kind of fucked up, you know. But you
Yeah.
know, undeniably, there's that seems to be the way it's going. But like the thing is, like it does feel, in some senses, like capitalism is kind of outpacing itself. Like it's producing beyond its ideological capacity to control it, or I suppose the capacity to
Mm.
control it ideologically. You know, like kind of what we're doing here, and other places and other sources, it's very dissenting. It really challenges the hegemony that is there. It's almost like the technology has evolved beyond the system that's in it. And I don't know. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that. Like, have we kind of, are we sort of coming towards the end of the capitalist periods? And I mean that in the grand historical sense of things. I don't mean it's going to end tomorrow, but do you think that it's going to end? And do you think that, I suppose, what's going on like here and socialist education more broadly, how do you think that that's going to relate to it? I know I've just kind of thrown out like a lot of random questions and a lot of random like
Mm.
observations, but do you think that these, I suppose, the development of productive forces will change the relations of production, or how do you think that that's going to develop in the future? Do you know? Do you think this will just become another commodified part of life? You know, like we'll commodify revolutionary thoughts and socialism and communism, and everyone will just buy their Che Guevara
Well,
t-shirts, and that'll be it.
we're definitely already seeing that, the commercialization of revolution. I mean,
Yeah,
going if you go in a fucking Nike shoe shop, they'll have fucking plaster on the walls like Black Lives Matter or
yeah,
Your Life Matters.
yeah. Buy Pepsi.
And then their sneakers are made by like child laborer in Indonesia or
Yep.
in Bangladesh or something. But
Yeah.
they co-opt. revolutionary messaging. I mean, everything is a revolution. Like fucking Microsoft will openly use the word revolution when they're describing their new Surface laptops or whatever. Like
That's right.
revolution isn't
Yeah.
a scary word anymore. Revolution is everyone's a revolutionary now.
Yeah.
But Rosa Luxemburg wrote about that there will come a point in history when we will either choose socialism or barbarism, and I think we are.
I think we're
uh,
beyond that at this stage.
I think we're beyond barbarism, and right now the choice is between socialism and extinction,
Yes.
because we're seeing capitalism is driving full speed ahead off a cliff edge,
Yeah.
and we are pretty soon going to be at the point of no return with climate change, where there's going to be unavoidable damage to the climate. We're going to see a lot of deaths, but perhaps with even more lasting consequences, we're going to see a lot of climate refugees.
Yeah.
And we're already seeing a lot of climate refugees. A lot of the refugees coming from Libya, from Syria, from Iraq are climate refugees. Um, but we are going to see a lot more of them as the climate continues to worsen,
Mm.
as people have to leave their homes and move in order to try to get a better life for themselves and their children. We are going to see. I mean, the refugee crisis that we had in like 2015, that was a drop in the bucket compared to the climate refugees that we're going to see going forward, unless something drastically changes very soon, and we change our carbon dioxide output, and we kind of turn the economy around. But that not happening, there's going to be a pretty big crisis. Um,
Bleak.
but revolutions are born in crises.
Mm.
So if we do get to that point, then we might have something of a chance at seeing more radical reforms made. Um, but I think the part that socialist education plays in all this is getting people. It's not even necessarily about getting the majority of the population to read Lenin or whatever.
Mm.
Like that's not the goal. The goal is to get people to look beyond what's going on right in front of them, and to recognize the pattern in what's happening. To recognize that, hang on, why is there an economic crisis like every 10 years? Like why does
Yep.
this keep happening? Why does the economy keep crashing? Like why does rent keep going up but my wages staying the same? Like why
Yep.
has this been happening for so long? And what exactly can we do about it? And I
Mm.
think a lot of people all over the world, even in America, where people are I mean, to be frank, indoctrinated into believing that they live in the best country on earth, and the richest country on earth, and everyone is free, and then everything is possible, and the American dream and all that.
Mm.
Like even there in America, people are starting to recognize that the system isn't working anymore, and just doing token reforms like the corporate Democrats seem to want to do, like, oh well, we'll do a public option for healthcare. Like I think a lot of people are recognizing that that's just talk. That's not the kind of radical change that needs to happen in order to turn this thing around and to actually save the planet that we live on.
Yeah.
Um, of course, when I'm saying that some people in America are starting to recognize that the system isn't working for them, I am mainly talking about white people. Black people have been pretty aware that the system isn't working for them for a while, I would say.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's nice that white people are catching up.
Yeah, I suppose they're kind of they're losing their historical positions of privilege and comfort, and things are getting worse and worse and worse, and more
Yeah.
pressure is being put on the working class, the entirety of the working class, and that's causing all these kinds of issues.
Yeah.
Fuck, yeah, it's gonna be really crazy to see how things develop. I don't know, like it feels to me, it's so crazy because I read like James Connolly. He died in 1916, and he has that like famous quote. He died in the Easter 1916 rising in
Yeah.
Ireland. fighting for, of course, socialism in Ireland, for socialist 32 county socialist republic. But he said this thing like, the day for patching up capitalism has gone. It's time. It must go. Like we need socialism now. And he was
Yeah.
writing that in 19. Actually, I can't remember. It was like the early 1900s. I'm not sure if it was 1916 or if it was a couple of years before that. But he was writing that then, and like it's over. It's like 104 years, at least 104 years later,
Mm.
and like we're still fucking with capitalism. Like
Yeah.
it's so depressing to think that like 104 years from now, we might still be fucking with capitalism. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's it's really bleak because like so many people are so excited about socialism developing, especially like in the, I suppose, former half of the 20th century, like with the USSR. There was a lot of
Mm.
promise, socialism spreading across the world. You had like the Eastern Bloc, spreading across Asia, all this sorts of stuff going on. Now the future for
Mm.
socialism is extremely bleak, with the exception of maybe, like really four or five, three or four even, really revolutionary Marxist groups for whom revolution really is on the horizon. I don't know what your thoughts are on actually existing socialism, but I mean, I think we can all probably agree that it's fairly watered down from the ideal versions that we have in our minds, just because imperialism is so strong, US
Yeah.
imperialism primarily.
I mean, it's frankly, I was in disbelief that Luis Arce and Evo Morales were able to come back to Bolivia.
That's unbelievable, yeah.
'Cause, I mean, I thought that like when the coup happened, I was like, well, that's it.
Yeah.
Like Bolivia is going to be a military dictatorship for
Mm.
like 20 years now.
It's going to be Pinochet, it's going to be like Brazil in like the 60s
Like
to the
Haiti,
80s.
yeah,
Yeah, like
like
Haiti,
Guyana, like
yeah.
a fucking number of these Latin American countries that the
Yeah.
U.S. have overthrown. And then there was an election, and the Socialist Party won a second time, and I think they got even more votes than they did when Eva was running. Just because I think people were fucking rightfully mad at the what's her name, Janine Añez,
Yeah, I know the one. I don't know her name, but I do know the one you're talking about.
who
Blonde
was,
hair.
I mean, she was extremely unpopular,
Mm.
very unlikable. I mean, she was a nobody before she became president. She was
Yeah.
just some random senator. Um, and
White
then
O
yeah,
kind of figure.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, the fact that they actually were able to call for a new election and to struggle and protest and all these things, that they actually won, and that she actually stepped down, and that the military didn't do another coup, like pretty insane. And I hope um I hope they can stay in power. I hope there's not another
Yeah,
coup.
I hope so too.
But
I don't have a huge amount of confidence, but
yeah.
I definitely do hope so. Because like I don't know, maybe I'm too cynical, but like it seems to me like they had the pink wave in Latin America like 10, 15 years ago already, and
Mhm.
it kind of failed. Like they just had like 4 to 8 years of success of kind of progressive social measures, and then it all just seemed to be rolled back by pretty much like fascistic characters
Mm.
very quickly. Like I'm thinking especially like Bolsonaro in Brazil and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just going to be the same thing again. I don't know. I feel like we're kind of sacrificing the well-being of the future on the altar of liberal democracy, and this seems to be an issue in Latin America. Like all of the progressive movements really seem to be playing nice. They're really wedded to the bourgeois liberal democratic framework, which
Mm.
I just don't know how successful that can be long term. I will say that like in Venezuela and stuff like that, um, they're kind of charting out new territory, or uncharted territory, I suppose. They're cutting out like a new path forward, which probably a lot of socialists and Marxists especially Marxist Leninists, would have thought previously impossible, you know, um, within that sort of democratic framework. But I do know as
Mm.
well that they're kind of sidestepping a lot of problems by, how can I say, maybe under the table kind of, I don't want to say like shady dealings, but they're kind of like people like accuse them of like a lot of corruption and stuff like that in Venezuela, and they accuse them of this and that. And I suppose the thing is like, I don't know, like for example, like if I found out like there was a really good communist who got into office in Ireland or something like that, you know, if there was a communist who got into office in Ireland and they had to like bribe some people to stay in office, I don't think I'd lose any sleep at night, to be
Yeah.
honest, you know. But at the same
I can
time,
understand the mindset. I don't know, maybe it's a bit idealist of me, but
mm,
I value transparency in government a lot.
mm,
I value privacy. I value people being held accountable. I kind of detest representative democracy.
yeah,
I I think that anyone who represents a large number of people, I think if you're in parliament, if you're a member of parliament in Sweden, on average, you represent like 50,000 people or something like that.
mm,
I think if you are in charge of the lives of 50,000 people, what you do, how you act, it should all be extremely transparent, and you should be immediately recallable if you do something that those 50,000 people don't want you to do.
mm,
Because what representative democracy is giving up the political power that you have, that you are guaranteed, and giving it to someone else in order for them to do what you want them to do.
mm,
But if there's no transparency and there's no accountability, you're just giving up your political power for nothing.
yeah. I sort of
So
think though, like they've set so many, like they've set the rules where like you can't do certain things.
mhm.
This is something that I kind of realized, like when I was like attempting to organize my workplace there last year at some point. And like I realized, like I prior to then I was all about perfect transparency, and you know you need to be open and honest about everything. But like when I was organizing the workplace, I realized like you need to do things like behind closed doors. You need to talk about these things in secret. You need to organize people to go out for drinks after work and talk about these issues then, rather than like on the floor, like where you're working, because your boss will hear you and your boss will fire you and kick people out and
Oh,
do all the
well,
stuff, you know. So,
that's uh, I think that's very different because that's a different power dynamic.
but don't you
Yeah.
think it's kind of like that in bourgeois democracy anyway? Like where the kinds of things that we want as socialists and communists, they've set it up so that those things are impossible. You know, like I think like with the
Yeah.
EU in particular, like you can't do like even like the like if you want to nationalize a certain industry, like you can't do that under EU law. It's illegal. You know,
Mhm.
they've set the boundaries against us, and it's kind of impossible to be fully transparent and open and to really push forward with a genuinely socialist program, you know.
Maybe. I think the problem, like in your example, your boss is the one who has power over you.
Mm,
In those situations, the person who should be transparent and the person who should be held accountable is your boss because he's the one in power. I think my main point is that power should always be challenged, power should always be critiqued,
mm,
and I can't remember if it was Nestor Makhno who said it or if it was someone else, but no one in power should ever feel comfortable, or no one
mm,
should ever feel comfortable having power.
mm, mm.
I'm not an anarchist, but I do greatly sympathize with that sentiment. Is
Yeah.
that if you are in charge of other people, you should never feel comfortable wielding that power. You should
Mm.
never lose sight of the fact that the responsibility of the lives of thousands or even millions of people are in your hands. You should never feel like that's just something to throw away.
I feel like
And you
you're.
should always be
I feel like
on edge.
you're getting into like cultural revolution territory here, like
Oh yeah.
storming the party HQ, get the people to rise up.
Well, I
Yeah.
think so. I don't like the idea of the revolution being carried out behind closed doors
Yeah.
and the people
Big
not
putsch.
knowing who's leading the revolution or why.
Mm.
I don't think that's socialism.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think that that's one thing definitely that the MLMs do get right. That sort of mass line sort of critique. Like you're always
Yes.
engaged with the masses, always embedded in the masses, between the party and the masses, but also even within the party. You know, like even like within the party, like the rank and file of the party, and the sort of the
Hmm.
highest up in the party, like the part, like whatever it might be, the central committee of the party or something like that. They're answerable to each other, and there's this kind of dialectical relationship between them. And yeah, as you said, like I suppose there always needs to be the ability for like recall in every situation, because unfortunately,
Hmm.
we, I suppose as communists we kind of try to downplay abuses of power in Marxist-Leninist organizations historically, but like we all know that it has happened and it can happen, and the structure is there
Yeah.
for that to be abused, especially with democratic centralism and the way some people will kind of try to warp that into being just basically not democratic centralism, but just ultra centralism. Like everything's just centralized, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's a massive problem. So yeah.
I do sympathize with anarchists a lot, and Maoists for that matter. Maoism and anarchism is similar in a lot of ways.
Mm,
But I've had a lot of good talks with American Johnson from Non Compete, for instance. We did a 5 hour live stream where we just talked about Marxism and anarchism, and
mm,
we agreed on a lot of things. And I think the main thing that I love about anarchism is the perspective that it has on unjustified hierarchies.
mm,
And yes, Marxism and historical materialism is important, and analyzing the class relations between things. But I think what anarchism can do in a post revolutionary situation is analyze the relations between the party and the people.
mm.
When the party claims to be the vanguard of the people and the party claims to represent the will of the people, the anarchists look at that and they say, this is a hierarchy. This is a situation where you have a bunch of people who are in power and they're hardly accountable to anyone. And they just kind of claim that whatever they're doing is in the interest of the people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And it is very, very important. I don't know if there's many people who would disagree with that in principle, at least. You know, like in principle, I think everybody's against unjustified hierarchies. I just feel that in some ideologies they take that a little bit more seriously than in others, and what is justified and what is unjustified might kind of
Mm.
might be presented in different ways. But
I think the thing about anarchism is I've had this thought
anarcho scapegoat
about
here.
I've had this thought about a dialectical relationship between a Marxist state and an anarchist opposition,
Hmm.
which is it's maybe it sounds weird and maybe it only works in my mind,
How
but
does
my
that play out?
idea for just any hypothetical country,
Hmm.
say it's run by a Marxist party and run along Marxist
So
lines.
we're talking about dictatorship, the proletariat, the socialists. It's heading in the
Yeah,
path towards communism, Marxist-Leninist
yes.
party. Okay, and then you've got like an
But then
anarchist opposition.
outside of the party and outside of the vanguard or whatever you want to call it, you have a anarchist opposition group uh, relentlessly offering critiques to the government at every point of the way. Everything they do, every decision that is made, everything that the Marxists and the politicians and everyone who has an ounce of power, everything that they do is criticized, and feedback is given to them every step of the way. This is how you should be doing this better. You should be doing this. Remember the people, remember the power that you're wielding, and don't forget that everything that you have can be taken away from you at any moment.
Hmm. Hmm. I feel like you're a Maoist, just waiting, waiting for, I don't know, like I don't know, like a waiting to flourish, or maybe like a Maoist still in the oven, or something like that. No, I do think that there's a
Maybe.
really important point, because it does resolve this kind of tension between uh, centralization and decentralization. It resolves this tension between the various levels of like hierarchy. It sort of reconciles them. It provides syntheses. Yeah, I think these are
Mhm.
definitely things that modern Marxists need to contend with. You know, we can't just uphold Stalin's USSR and say we just want to go back to that. We need to look at the problems and solve them moving forward with socialist projects for the 21st century. Uh,
Mhm.
otherwise, otherwise it's revisionism. It's dogmato revisionism. It's just trying to recreate the past, not understanding historical materialism as an evolving science. And yeah,
Mhm.
these are all the issues we need to contend with, you know. And as you say, you're very right. Like the anarchists do have some valid complaints. Okay, I know I'm gonna get fucking cancelled by thank you Twitter for having saying that, but there are some valid criticisms there and some truths in what were said. I don't
I
know if
think
sorry, go
I
ahead.
think there are truths in every leftist tendency, in every way of
Except
thinking.
for sadism. Fuck that.
Well, they might have
Nuclear.
a point about the dolphins or whatever.
Well, maybe the Dolphins were. Yeah, it's pretty solid theory.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, but
sorry, I cut you off.
I'm very passionate about democracy and transparency in governments
Mm,
and that kind of thing. I think that's kind of the main thing that I'm passionate about when it comes to organizing like a political system is making sure that anyone who has power is never comfortable wielding
mm,
it. I feel pretty strongly about that.
mm, mm. Extremely
I don't
based.
know if I would necessarily call myself a Maoist. I've read Mao. I've read plenty of Mao. I don't know if at any step of the way I felt like, yeah, this is exactly who I am. Um, I mean, I agree plenty with Lenin. I agree plenty with Mao. I
mm,
also agree plenty with Kropotkin and Rosa Luxemburg and Marx,
mm.
obviously, um, and even Kerensky and Kalinin and uh, certain points of Bernstein.
Uh oh.
Like,
All right, we're gonna have to end the stream there. It's been lovely. It's been really great. Nah, I'm only messing.
no, but I mean, I read a lot of books from a lot of different kinds of thinkers, and a lot of them make a lot of good points. And I
Mm,
don't think that I don't think that there's much of a purpose in boxing yourself in and to just limiting yourself to a single line of thought or a single ideology.
mm. Yeah, actually, we were going to talk a little bit about that actually in the next question.
Yeah.
When we were going to talk a little bit about maybe the challenges that people might have. I suppose when becoming or when attempting to become educated in socialism in this day and age. I mean, there's serious issues with getting boxed in, and I'd be really interested to hear your perspective. Before we jump into that, I have a confession. I really need to use the bathroom.
All right.
And I'm not 100% sure how much time you have left. How much time do you have a little bit more time left over or
Oh yeah, no, I'm good.
oh you're
I don't
good.
have
Okay.
anything.
Cool. Well, how about if I were into the bathroom, then maybe you can get started answering this question. I'll jump back in a moment. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Okay, so I'll just read that out again. So, what are some of the challenges we face when trying to become educated in socialism? Back in a minute.
All right.
Cheers.
Um. Well, I think the challenge that we face, I think the challenge that anyone faces whenever someone is new to socialism, they have this impulse to pick the brand of socialism that they want. They have the urge to say I am a Leninist or I am a Stalinist or I'm a Maoist or I'm a Luxemburgist. Even when all you've ever done is you read the half the Communist Manifesto and then maybe the first page of Reform or Revolution, and then you're like, yeah, I'm a Luxemburgist. I think my number one advice to people who are new to socialism is just hold on before you call yourself anything. Just if you're gonna put a label on yourself, just do like an umbrella label. Just say you're a socialist, say you're a communist, say you're a Marxist if that's what you are, or an anarchist if that's what you are. But give yourself room to grow and to explore, and don't just find a box that seems to fit and then just live in it. Um, be open minded. Look at other sources and other thinkers. Look at um, read books that disagree with the ideas that you currently have, right? Like read if you're reading Luxembourg and you're really agreeing with Luxembourg, then pick up some Lenin. And if you're reading Lenin, then pick up some Luxembourg, right? If you're reading Stalin, then pick up some Trotsky. And if you're reading Trotsky, then pick up some Stalin. And I think not allowing yourself to preemptively decide which side of every conflict that's ever happened in the history of socialism that you're on, right? Just
Spanish Civil War. Let's go. What are your thoughts now?
oh yeah, I'm on the side of the Republic.
Based. Apologies, I cut you off there. That was my way of saying I'm back.
Yeah.
Sorry, you continue.
No, I've seen something that happens to a lot of like baby leftists is they come out of the woodworks and they're like, "Hey, I just learned about socialism for the first time. I'm a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, Gonzalo thought, Prakandapathist." And then 2 weeks later, they're like, "I'm a vanguardist, Luxembourgist," or like, "I'm a Bernsteinist, I'm a Kotskist, I'm a Kalininist, I'm a Krupskaist," or all these things. Like they just switch their ideology every 2 weeks. When in reality, what they're really doing is they're learning.
Mm.
They're in the process of learning. But at every step, every time they learn something new and they change their mind a little bit, they're like, "Oh, this is the correct opinion. Like this is now I'm done learning." You're never done learning.
Mm.
You should never be like, "Oh, now I'm done learning. I've reached the final conclusion. Maoism is definitely what I am, and I'm never going to be anything else. I was wrong before, but I'm correct now." Like you're gonna like if you're new to leftism, you're gonna learn something else. You're gonna encounter a different perspective. You're gonna change your mind again later. So I'm that's kind of one of the reasons that I'm cautious about saying that I'm anything in particular. I don't say that I'm a Maoist. I don't say that I'm a Leninist. I just say Marxist because sometimes I change my mind. Sometimes I want to be open to other things. I don't like the idea of boxing myself in.
Mm. Would you call
And
yourself an
I see
orthodox Marxist?
I see people are really reacting strongly to me mentioning Trotsky, but I think
Yeah, they
if
get
all
mad.
you know about Trotsky is the memes that you've heard about Trotsky and you've only heard bad things about Trotsky, but you've never ever picked up a book by Trotsky, I think now is a high time to do so. Even if you don't think that you're going to agree with him,
Time to end the stream again. Here we go. Jeez.
I think it's worthwhile reading people who you disagree with.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Even
You're
if
right.
it's not me trying to convert you to Trotskyism, it's me saying that you've reached a conclusion based on half the evidence. You should read the other half. You should read the other perspective, if anything, to reinforce the point that you currently have. Right? If you
Yep.
read Trotsky and you're like, "Wow, this guy really sucks and he's really stupid," that's great. You've reinforced the opinion that you already had. But if you read Trotsky and you're like, "You know what, this guy makes a bit more sense than I thought he would," then you just learned something.
Mm. No, it's a good
And
point.
yeah,
It is. It's a really good point. I am bitter, obviously, because the Trotskyists are so much bigger in Ireland than the rest of the Marxists. But yeah, no, you are right. Like I've literally encouraged people to read like fascist literature before, just to know what your enemy is and what they think and where they're coming from. Like literally
mm-hmm.
read Mussolini and you'll realize how dog shit this ideology is.
Oh yeah.
Just pick it up. Just pick it up. Have a little read of it. You don't need to agree with it, but as you said, you're gonna learn. You're gonna learn something. You'll
Yeah.
understand your enemy's positions better.
There's no magical power in books that like subvert your mind or in some way try to trick you into becoming something. Like you can read Mein Kampf without becoming a Nazi.
Mm,
Like you can read Mein Kampf and
dog shit
realize
book.
that Hitler was a dog shit writer
Yeah.
and all of his ideas are contradicting themselves and he's
Yep.
fucking stupid. Right? Like you shouldn't
Yep.
be afraid that like if you read Mein Kampf, you're gonna come out the other end hating the Jews. Like reading, I think in general is good. I think it's good to read things. I think maybe especially it's good to read things by people who you disagree with. And then yeah, part of it is know your enemy, know what it is, know why you disagree with people. know
Mm.
what it is that they believe in, and in that way find out why you disagree with them.
Mm. Yeah, no, it is a good. I would, I suppose, I would caution um people reading this stuff at certain points in their political development. Like, if you've never, okay, so for example, I brought up fascism and fascist literature as kind of an extreme example of someone who obviously we would all disagree with. But if you were reading that like for the first time, if that's like the first exposure you had to any kind of political theory, I think it would probably have a very different effect on you than it would if you were somebody who had read Marx and read Lenin and had read Stalin and Mao and all these sorts of people, you know. Um,
Hmm.
I feel like these kinds of texts, this kinds of literature, even these kinds of speeches, I sometimes look at like what the Nazis are doing, like the far right are doing in Ireland, and I watch like some speeches they give, and there's moments where I'm like, oh shit, if I wasn't a Marxist Leninist, if I didn't have like the education in political theory that I do have right now, I could potentially be taken in by this particular point that they're making, and then that could lead
Hmm.
me to all kinds of other like horrific. It could send me down that pipeline if it caught me at a different time. So that's I suppose the one caution I would have. Like, if you are sort of recommending that people like read this stuff that contradicts their particular worldview, um,
Hmm.
maybe approach with caution. Make sure you do your reading beforehand. You understand what it is that you're reading and the effects that that's had, the implications of it. Like, you could probably find some fascist writers who wrote something that, like, one article ever written by such and such a horrific organization that you'd be like, oh, okay, that's a pretty decent article. Okay, fine, whatever. And then you start reading more of their stuff, and they slowly start to bring you into that horrific worldview, and we know the consequences of that. We know the consequences are very damaging. So I suppose that's the only like note of caution that I want to provide with this conversation when it comes to reading, like reading your enemy, if you will. You know, I know it's kind of it's different because I'm talking about like reading direct enemies. Trotsky isn't necessarily equivalent to fascists, but
Mussolini. Yeah.
yeah, it's probably a little bit
I would
unfair.
equate the two.
And I apologize to the Trotskyists who are in the audience, if there are any, and haven't been scared off by my anti-Trotskyist rants thus far. But yeah, hopefully that kind of illustrates how I feel about it, or what I'm thinking about it right now. Anyway, at least I'm not sure if that makes any sense though.
Hmm. Um,
Hopefully it does.
no, yeah, but I feel like if you're, far enough along your way into socialism, and you feel comfortable in the position that you are, um, I don't think you necessarily have anything to fear from reading books by the people. You're not going to become a serial killer by reading the Zodiac letters or whatever.
Yeah, it's true. Ah,
If
you
you're
know
in a
what it
very
is.
vulnerable position, and yeah, go ahead.
You know what it is. I got trapped with a Trotskyist pretty early. they, they nabbed me. They snagged me up very early in my political developments, because the Trotskyists kind of dominate the socialists' left wing political landscape in Ireland generally.
Mhm.
There are social democratic left Republicans, but as well, kind of with massive impact and significance. But the Trotskyists generally dominate the socialist left, the far left, and I very much was curious about socialism and about Marxism and all these sorts of things. And they would sort of talk about Marxism and they would talk about Leninism, and they did the old, you know, Marxism and Leninism thing, not the Marxism Leninism thing, the Marxism and
Yeah.
Leninism thing. And so I found myself getting kind of swept up in a lot of the kind of stuff that they were saying, and I was sort of being fed this narrative of history and the degenerated worker state and everything state capitalism, and you know, like the pure representation of socialism was actually like the NEP period when Lenin was in charge, which ironically like Lenin actually called state capitalists, but yeah, they kind of just, you know, brush over that part. So yeah, I don't know, maybe this is kind of like old wounds kind of being like opened up for me where I'm kind of like remembering like my history of it. But yeah,
Well, my indoctrination when I joined the Communist Party was pretty much the opposite. Is I just learned that
nice.
Stalin was a swell guy,
Based.
and Trotsky had it coming.
I'm sorry. I'm being a little bit silly here, but yeah, no,
No, but
obviously
like,
it's not as extreme as that, but yeah,
I think
it's kind of
for
funny.
any leftist organization, if you're gonna be talking about history and you're gonna be talking about the Soviet Union, which on the one hand, I'm like, I don't really give a shit about what the fuck happened in the Soviet Union in the 1930s. Like, I don't think that's necessarily super relevant to whatever is going on right now. Like, yeah, maybe on some superficial plane it is irrelevant, but like, if you're really gonna like, it's not like the thing to be like super obsessed about. Like, I get it, you want to have your opinions on it, but it's like,
Mm,
you can get over it. Like, it's not that fucking important.
mm,
But if you're gonna have discussions about history and history of socialism, and you're gonna be talking about the Soviet Union and all these kind of things, I think it's important whether you're a Trot organization or a Stalinist organization or whatever kind of organization you are to have a nuanced opinion on history.
yeah.
To not go to either extreme of saying Stalin did nothing wrong or Stalin did everything wrong.
Mm,
If you're going to be talking about history, I think, like, as someone who studies history, mostly, I mean, a lot of it is ancient history, but 1930 can be kind of ancient in some ways.
yeah.
Um, if there's anything to that you learn after you study history in university, it's that history is made up. History doesn't fucking exist. Like, history might as well not have happened because there's no such thing as an objective fact in history. Like, everything is cherry picked, everything is biased,
Mm,
every source is biased. Like, everywhere, like every step along the way, there's sources missing. There's text that's left out. There are assumptions made. There are like different cultural perspectives. Like, you have British historians analyzing an ancient Egyptian tomb or whatever, and they're putting their own spin on it and their own perspectives and biases on it. Like, every step along the way, there's always something that distorts the reality, and history is always going to be nuanced, because history is a summation of human beings, and just a single human being is incredibly complicated and
mm,
very much not black and white. And history is thousands or millions of people who are turned into black or white.
mm,
So I think it's important to recognize that you can never really have all the facts on history.
mm,
You can only the best you can do is a blurry black and white picture. You know,
mm.
you can't get 4K history. 4K history is what's happening right now, right? Like, and as time goes on, the resolution drops. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
I think you were
Nuance
I
in
think you
history
I
is
think you were
important.
leading up to Trotsky based. I think.
No, I was saying that don't get so hung up on history. Don't base your entire political organization or political party around something that happened 100 years ago.
Mm,
It doesn't even matter that much.
mm, mm. Yeah,
I
absolutely. We
think I
need to.
think I think in many ways it's more important to look forward than look back,
Mm, mm. I think that
especially because the past can divide us so much.
yeah, it definitely can. Definitely can. You're right. It can cause all kinds of divisions. As you said, we were joking earlier on about I disagree with that thing that Stalin said in the 1930s. So let's start a new party, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of fucked up. Yeah, yeah. You're kind of like I'm kind of like I kind of agree, but I also kind of disagree. Like I kind of like I do really understand that like you need to look historic like from a historical materialist perspective. Like you do need to look at the world historical revolution, see what worked, what didn't work, what really advanced proletarian workers' control and democracy and the cause towards socialism. What looking at history sort of as this kind of, I suppose, science lab of development and testing out different strategies, things that work, things that don't work. So I suppose in that regard, broad strokes, I think it's really important that we do pay attention to history and we do pay attention to what worked and what didn't work and what actually advanced the cause of socialism and what didn't advance the cause of socialism. And I would say, like on that point, I haven't seen Trotskyism advance the cause of socialism, so that's why for me it's not as important, but even though you might say, okay, well, there's such and such an important critique that he provided, and I think I can take that point. Um, but I suppose I do always want to sort of look at the world historical revolutions and see what was successful about this, what was not successful about this. I want to look at the Paris Commune and say,
Mhm.
why did that fall? Like, why was that not successful? Why is it that the Bolshevik Revolution was more successful than that? What were the successes of the Chinese Revolution, and what were the failures and shortcomings of that? What
Mhm.
could be moving forward with that knowledge, not discarding that knowledge and like pretending like we're starting from point zero, like we're just starting on ground zero and creating like a new socialist theory where we're having to like recreate the wheel or something like that now. That's already been done. We've got hundreds and hundreds of years of socialist theory and history there to learn from. So I think that it's really
Mhm.
important that we do take that on board. But I also take your point that we probably shouldn't be getting caught up in these kinds of divisions, and especially personal disputes that happened historically, because that's not necessarily productive to us. If
I think there
yeah,
is a fine line between analyzing, learning, and critiquing history and being obsessed with a very specific history
mm,
and idealizing history and almost making a specific version of history, a specific retelling of history, part of your political identity. Something that I noticed. I don't know how if it's a big problem in Marxism Leninism as a whole. I don't want to make a general statement, but in
mm,
something that I noticed in the Marxist Leninist, the Communist Party of Sweden, is you see a lot of people. There's only one version of history that's
mm,
allowed, and you hear the same point kind of regurgitated a lot, and you don't hear a lot of self reflection, like why or reflection on history in general. What it is you come in and you are brainwashed by the Swedish education system, and you have all these wrong ideas about Stalin, and then you learn the correct version of history.
mm,
And the correct version of history is he did nothing wrong. And you're not allowed, when you're a member of the party, you're not allowed to criticize that. You're not
mm,
allowed to disagree with that or even ask questions about that. You just take that for granted.
mm,
Everything that you've been told is a lie, and this is the truth. Um, that is not history. That's the idealization of history. That's a kind of utopian vision of history, and that's using history for a political purpose.
mm,
That's not even history. That's not analyzing history. That's not learning from history. That's learning nothing from history.
mm,
So I agree with you. We should learn from history. But what I see a lot of, or what I see can happen, is instead of learning from history, is you revise history
oh
and
yeah,
you retell history, and you don't learn from it more so than you just use it. You
mm,
use it to make a point.
mm. Yeah, it's a fair point. It definitely is an issue, and it's it's a massive issue in Ireland as well. Actually, I think back to the 1916 Rising and how all kinds of groups, all kinds of like across the political spectrum from far left to far right, will try to claim that moment, to try to claim that rising, to sort of legitimize their particular ideology, whatever it might be. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of silly, actually. I can sit here and be like, oh well, how ridiculous it is that the far right are trying to claim that. But like they're saying the exact same thing about the far left, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, I suppose there is an element of picking and choosing moments that will sort of give historical legitimacy and invoke the authority of history, the authority of this kind of tradition. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in order to legitimize your current program or your current ideology or your current trajectory where you're going like right now. So I do take your point, and I do think that's it is very very true, and it is very very useful to keep in mind. And and it's something that I'm really seeing it right
Mm.
now in Ireland with the far right. It's like they're actually trying to superimpose themselves onto our history, and it's just so like blatant. But well, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I take your point.
Yeah.
It is important to take that in mind.
As someone who loves history and is very enthusiastic about history, what I hate seeing is kind of the bastardization of the subject. Is it's not loving history, it's not appreciating history, it's not history, it's just regurgitating. It's just it's not history for history's sake. It's using a version of history for a very political purpose.
Hmm.
But I love history. I love learning history, and I love learning about cultures and then people living in different eras. And I love learning the nuances, because every situation that you analyze, every event that happened in history, the more you look into it, the more nuanced it is.
Hmm.
Um, the worst kind of history retelling is the one where you say that in this situation there was a good guy and there was a bad guy,
Hmm.
and there was a good thing to do and there was a bad thing to do, and there were two options. One was good and one was bad, and the good guy chose the good option and the bad guy chose the bad option, and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
That to me is not history.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really really interesting. It kind of interestingly, it actually kind of brings me full circle to coming back to the subject of education with regard to history, because I think about like when it comes to history and when it comes to everything we learn like in school and education, um, the pieces of work that we are shown in school, the stuff that's kind of considered like canon for like the Western world. I don't know if you've ever looked at like Raymond Williams or like cultural materialism or any of this kind of stuff. But it's fascinating how in Western societies they have chosen a particular canon of important works in order to justify the current ideology.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like we all study like Shakespeare. That's like really important. That's a really important text. Why are we all studying Shakespeare? Like,
Yeah.
what is the class character of us doing that, of us reproducing that and constantly studying that again and again? Like, who does that benefit? Who does it benefit when you take an exam that essentially says what's your favorite thing about monarchy? you know
Yeah.
like actually it's funny if you look at the leaving certs, which is the final exams in Ireland, right? Like the high school, secondary school, the final exam, it's called the leaving cert, and one of the questions is about what's the text? What's the name of it? Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is the text. John Milton, I think, is the name of the author, and it basically tells the story of like Adam and Eve, and this is kind of the early '90s, and this was very much Ireland as theocracy, basically. Like we were still like very much under like Catholic control. Catholicism
Mm-hmm.
still to this day has a really strong influence over the schools, but like it basically owned all the schools and controlled all the schools, at that time. And the question they asked about this book, Paradise Lost, was essentially like, what's your favorite thing about the Bible? like, like write an essay about how great the Bible is, about how great this
Yeah.
story is. And it's not a question of like, do you think this is good? It's tell us what is your favorite thing about what we presented you. Tell us what's your favorite thing.
Yeah.
And so it's super fucked up. And I've seen examples of that as well. I've seen a few different people who have noted similar questions asked about Shakespeare and with regard to monarchy in England as well.
Yeah.
And of course, when they still have like the Queen of England and stuff like that. I think it's what's that pointing towards? What's that pointing to?
Mm.
And we still see this. So we're selecting pieces of history to justify this kind of lineage, this cultural identity, this ideology, and yeah, well, I suppose in a sense we're like creating these historical narratives, which, as you kind of alluded to, might not necessarily be reflective of the objective reality, but they, I suppose, in many ways just uphold the present moment and the power structures that are in place at this particular moment.
Mm. I think something that you've seen a lot of critique on history education in Sweden in particular, but I'm sure it's very similar in other countries, is when we learn history in primary school and even high school, but particularly in primary school, when you learn history, what you learn is the history of kings,
Mm.
and you learn the
Yeah,
history of,
the great man.
yeah, the great men of history, and you learn the history of the Swedish Empire. And there's great importance placed on Christianity and how we, I mean, if pagan beliefs are even mentioned at all, they're kind of thrown to the side, and then there's a great deal of time and interest placed on learning about the history of Christianity in Sweden, and Protestantism, and then Catholicism, and all these kinds of like, talk a lot about Christianity, a lot about the kings, and a lot about the empires and the wars that we had. Very little time is spent talking about the people or the persecution or the oppression of the native peoples or the oppression of the Finns,
Mm.
which we did. I mean, Sweden was an empire. We conquered large parts of Europe. We weren't, benevolent rulers. We were just an empire like anyone else. But we're taught in schools that, well, this was a time of great power when Sweden was really powerful. And it's generally just taught as this great thing when Sweden was this big, powerful empire and everyone cared about Sweden. It wasn't that cool. And yeah, the oppression of the native peoples of the Finns, or any other group of people, is certainly not mentioned.
Mm.
Maybe if we talk about feudalism, maybe in high school we learn about feudalism and we kind of learn that, yeah, it wasn't that great being a peasant.
Yeah.
But growing up, we learn about the kings and how great the kings were. And Gustav Vasa, he was such a great king because he translated the Bible to Swedish from Latin, and people could go to church, and church sermons were in Swedish, and that wasn't that great because now everyone could be Christian. Well, like, now everyone could know the Word of God. Isn't that great? Isn't that good? And
Mm.
then it's not until like the last year of high school when we're like, all right, so World War II.
Then shit gets real. It's very similar in
Yeah.
Ireland. Very similar in Ireland.
Um,
Like we don't talk, as you know, you mentioned paganism specifically. Like we never
yeah.
talk about paganism in Ireland. It's just been completely, how can I say, like, what's the equivalent? Like, like you whitewash something, but like they Catholic wash like pagan history. Catalawash. I don't know how you'd say that, but that's exactly what they did. They just kind of superimposed Catholicism onto everything prior to
Yeah.
Catholicism arriving here,
I
and
guess the Christianization of history.
yeah, yeah, big brain.
Yeah. But
Nice.
when you look at that, and you kind of think about it for a while, you think about how this isn't, like, even if these things are true, right? This is not the complete history.
Mm.
Like, yeah, we're taught about these kings and what they did and what they said and what they wrote, and yeah, all of these things are true. Like, all these things, like, nothing we learn here is false, but it's a sort of lie by omission,
Mm.
because there are a lot of things that we don't learn. There are, like, we don't think about the women. Like, we don't think
Yeah,
about what it was like being a woman at this time.
yeah.
We don't think about what it was like being a peasant at this time. We don't think about what it was like being a pagan or a Finn or a Sami, or any kind of ethnic minority or a Jew. We don't think about those things. We don't talk about them.
Mm.
We only talk about what it was like being a nobleman.
Mm.
Um, and and you think about, why do we spend so much time talking about Christianity in schools? And the reason is Sweden is nominally, officially secular, but culturally we're Christian.
Mm.
And I think a lot of Swedes are very afraid of letting go of that, because Swedes generally aren't religious people. We don't go to church, but we are culturally Christian, and we're certainly very afraid of brown people and Muslims,
Wow.
right? So there is a political purpose of learning a lot about Christianity in schools. It's not just because, oh, Christianity was very important in the history of Sweden. Sure, yeah, it had some importance, but the reason that we learn so much about Christianity is to kind of reaffirm that Sweden is still a Christian country. So, like, if you're not a Christian, like, don't feel too comfortable. Like, the history of this country is the history of Christianity, my friend.
Hmm.
Like, that's the kind of like that's the purpose of teaching so much Christianity in schools. Of course, we don't teach kids to be Christian. We just teach them that Sweden is Christian and Sweden is great. Like
Yeah.
you put two and two together.
Hmm.
Like a little bit
In
leading
Ireland,
education.
it's a lot more explicit. It's a lot more like your prayers every day and like everything you do in school. Like you have to go to like Holy Communion and you get your
Mm,
confirmation and like they teach you how to be a good Catholic in Ireland. In our public schools,
mm,
these aren't just like specific private Catholic schools. Like just in the public schools in the public system,
yeah,
very intense Catholic educational system here.
we have some. I went to a like a public school, like a municipal school, but
Mm.
it was still very Christian.
Yeah.
Like the school was right next to a church, so we had
Mm.
uh like we'd had class in church sometimes. Like
Okay.
on
Right.
Christmas, we on Christmas or near Christmas, we would go to church, and the priest would tell us about Jesus and Mary and Joseph and the birth of Jesus and all this stuff.
Mm.
And I remember I was way too young to understand any of it, but I remember there was controversy because there were Muslims in my class,
Mm.
and the school was telling them like, no, like this is part of your education to go into a Christian church and to learn about Jesus. And their parents were saying like, no, like I'm not gonna let my like 6 year old like Muslim son or Muslim daughter go to a Christian church and be taught about Jesus. Like that's like no, I'm raising my child Muslim. And the school was essentially saying like, well, sucks to suck, but this is required education. Like this is part of the curriculum or whatever. Like we've decided this is what's going to be done.
What the
So there
fuck?
was this like big controversy in this small town of ours that like 200 people.
Mm.
Um, I think when I was a kid, I thought it was like, oh, how silly. Why don't they just want to go to church? Like, why are they making such a fuss?
Mm.
I didn't fucking understand anything. I thought everything the priest was telling us was just the truth. Like all these
Yeah.
Muslims are, they're just scared to learn, or like they just have a weird fear of being in a church, and like that's kind of weird. Why are you afraid of a building? But yeah,
It was so
but
like what you're saying there, like just assuming like everything that the priests are telling you is true. I mean, when I was a little kid, like I wasn't taught the difference between like objective reality and beliefs. Like literally, that was not something
mm,
I learned. The existence of gods and the existence of like the tables that we were sitting at, they were both like equally objectively true from my upbringing, like from my child mind, like like when I was like 6 7 8 years old, like learn these things, like these were just taught as facts. There was no division, there was no demarcation between this is what we believe and this is what we can actually prove to be true via the scientific method. It was crazy. It was crazy. Just there was no conceptualization of reality that was cohesively taught to all of us, and
mm,
that's, I suppose, that's how it is when your school's run by Catholics. But it seems like it was quite similar enough in your circumstances as well.
yeah. I think legally the the king of Sweden is still officially appointed by the Christian God.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but we like to pretend that we're secular. We're very like unofficially officially Christian.
yeah, yeah. A lot of countries are like that as well. I know Brazil's very similar as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. It's
You
super
at
super
least
messed up.
you have a republic. That's something.
Nominally, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a dictatorship to bourgeoisie, so let's not fool ourselves.
Well,
But
Yeah, I just
it's actually if you
I like the idea of not having a monarch.
yeah, but I don't know. Like we created a monarch out of God, which was just the Catholic Church, you know, and whatever they wanted. I mean, like if you read the Constitution of
Mm.
Ireland, like the first line is about how everything is secondary to the word of God. There's like mentions in
Mm.
the Irish Constitution of well, first of all, it starts off like in the name of like the Holy Ghost, the Holy Father. What is it? The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, etc., etc. But there's literally like a line in the Irish Constitution where they say that like even laws are secondary to the word of God. So like the divine creates the most important ruling. Like if you're in court and a priest comes in and says, "Come here to me. I was talking to God there, and he said that actually it's okay that this lad did something really fucked up. I don't know. He robbed somebody or
Mm.
he shot up a place or whatever he did. You know, God told me it's cool, so forget about it." And like that was that was kind of it. Like the church could basically do whatever the fuck they wanted. Like the coming from like the Roman Catholic Church like in Rome, they could basically just do whatever the fuck they wanted, and they got away with all kinds of really crazy things, which only sort of came to light like in the late 90s in Ireland,
Yeah.
and that was and still is constitutionally protected. It's so fucked up.
Mm.
It's so fucked up. Like all these kids got like sexually abused, and there were all these like women who were put into these like workhouses, these mother and baby homes for getting pregnant outside of marriage. Um, and in those mother and baby homes, like there's one home in Toom where like 800 babies died, and they just left the fucking babies' dead bodies in a fucking septic tank. So they found like 800 dead. They unearthed the remains of 800 babies in this place in Toom. That they were just they'd obviously died due to like malnourishment and being neglected by the state-run institution of the workhouse. Um, and uh, and yeah, again, that's grand because it's it's by the Catholic Church, and they're protected by the state now. And there's all these documents that people are trying to publish now about all the fucked up stuff that happens. But even those documents are still being protected, and people can't access them. So it's an ongoing battle for, and it comes back to like what we were talking about before, like for history. It's an ongoing battle for history to understand what really happened. What really happened for like the women, for normal working people in these times. Um,
Yeah.
so it's pretty fucked up. I know it's like, oh, cool. Well, at least you're republic. You're not a monarchy. It's at least on paper it's better, but like in reality, we're a theocracy. you know, until
Yeah.
until about 2000s, really, until the end of the 1990s. So we're still kind of
Mm.
like rebuilding from then. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right. Anyway, come here to me. We're coming up to like 2.5 hours of streaming.
Yeah.
Jesus, it's been really great. But I'm conscious that I've kept you for like a really long time.
No,
Um.
no, that's okay.
So listen, I want to say, I really want to say thank you so much for coming on and for taking the time out to come on and talk about all of these issues. It's really been really interesting and really you've given me a lot of really useful insight as well, especially like in terms of like history and stuff like that, and like a lot to sort of think about and a lot to chew on. And it's been a really good conversation. And I really appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to come on and discuss these kinds of issues, but socialism and education. And before we wrap things up, do you want to maybe tell some people what are some useful sources from a socialist political education perspective where people can learn? Any other shout outs you want to do, work that you have coming up? Maybe if you want to tell people a little bit about Twitch and what you've been working on there. Anyway,
Yeah.
any shout outs at all that you have? Now's the time to do it.
Well, if you're interested in learning about socialism, I have a website called socialism101.com.
Based.
And on that site, among other things, there's this big Q&A, which is like the big attraction, but you can also find a reading list, which is just a link to a Google Docs document. There's a reading list that I put together, which is a reading list for beginners. And it's essentially a list of books that I think every leftist should have read at least once. So check that out
Mm.
and look through it. And if there are any books that you haven't read yet, pick them up. And there are links to reading them as well on Marxist.org.
Based.
I have a YouTube channel, obviously, where I recently uploaded a video called "How Capitalism Causes Depression," which was a collaboration with Second Thought, who made another video about the kind of the Marxism 101 and the basics of Marxism and socialism.
Mm.
Um, and then I have a Twitch, which is just kind of a fucking around, having fun with friends, doing. I think last stream I was learning all the provinces of Japan and doing geography quizzes. That was pretty fun.
Nice. Real shit.
Yeah, I really like streaming. I don't earn money from it, but I have a lot of fun. So I do live streams every weekend. So
Mm.
Saturday and Sunday at about 5 GMT.
Mm. Fantastic, fantastic. I don't think there's a link to the Twitch in the description box below right now, but I'll definitely update that after we're finished the stream
Oh yeah,
here, so people can check that out.
it's just twitch.tv/azureScapegoat. I think you can just Google
Oh
my
yeah,
name and it all comes up.
yeah. You see, you've got kind of like a unique name, so like it's really easy. Like
Oh yeah,
like on Twitter or whatever like that. Like there's no one else called Azure Scapegoat, so yeah, everybody can just
yeah.
jump and like very easily find you. For me, it's like
It would
Paul
suck if
Marin.
I was called like Juan or Jacob or
Yeah,
something. Like,
just like literally Juan, just that's it, like Jacob or whatever. Yeah, yeah, it sucks because like even like I have to always like find little workarounds. There's a bunch of Paul Martins on every other network, and
yeah,
they're always inactive accounts as well. They're always inactive. They're not doing anything. So I'm just like, oh, you motherfucker,
yeah,
why don't you just give it to me, please? Just give me that account. Why? Why? But so it's always like Paul Marin IE or Paul Marin
yeah.
underscore this, that, or the other, and yeah, so it's kind of tricky to find. But
I'm very lucky
yeah.
to have a unique name I can just use anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless
Listen,
someone steals it from me, which has happened actually, that someone just fucking
really,
makes an account with my name. It's like, oh yeah, you totally were gonna use that.
what a bastard.
Yeah.
Did they actually try to like steal your identity in any way, or was it just they just took the name
No, they just took
randomly?
the username, so I couldn't use
Oh,
it.
okay.
So I was gonna start an
Oh,
Instagram to put up pictures of my dog.
what a dick.
So instead of Asher Scapegoat, I had to be like Asher's dog or something stupid.
Ah,
That sucked.
no, that's a pain
But
in
I
the
don't even
ass.
use Instagram anymore, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah. Fuck Instagram.
That guy won. He took my username and I lost all interest.
Yeah, pushed it off the platform. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if that guy is watching this stream, I disapprove strongly. I strongly disapprove of what you've done. Please return that username to its rightful owner, our comrade right here, azureScapegoat. Listen, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you coming on. Everybody, do go ahead and check out azureScapegoat. You'll find a link to the YouTube channel and the Twitter in the description box below. Go help out our comrade on Patreon if you can. Go check them out on Twitch. And yeah, I'll do a quick shout out to the people in the chats that I see here have stuck around. Ben Toth, Socialist Swan, Sydney Rika, Papi Cholo, The Engelsists. You'll have a stroke reading this. Great name. Darth Reven, Jake English, Jessidoya, Emulator Noob, Chris P, and Emma Mod. Thank yous all so much. Enjoy the rest of the week. I will be back on Friday. Mel is coming on. I don't even I know the name's Mel, but kind of a Twitter personality. I don't know what we're gonna be talking about, but we're gonna be vibing and having some fun. So yeah, that'll be Friday night. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Is there anything else that we needed to cover before we wrap this up, Azure? I'm just trying to make sure we didn't
No, that was it. It's been fun.
we got it. Okay, brilliant. Okay, cool. Cheers, everybody. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the week. August Slán go full. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.